HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms and our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until at last we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits in that secret a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest health care program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single-payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of health care. I believe this health care is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are health care. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer health care is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Friday, Shabbat Shalom, TGIF, Juma Mubarak, whatever it may be for you. It's the end of the week, it's the last day, and it's Anything Goes Friday. Although, our second hour today, Congressman Khanna will be with us for the entire hour. He is a vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, very, very wired into what's going on with all these, all of our priorities, right? What's going on? And so we're going to do a progressive national town hall meeting here on the program in our second hour. So, there's that. But the first hour, the third hour, it's you and me. And I want to start, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. As I said, Anything Goes Friday. But I want to start with my rant today that I posted over at HartmannReport.com. When does the greed stop? And it's basically every aspect of American life now has been corrupted by greed, and maybe you can add to this list, but the whole point of government, the reason why governments are instituted among men, right, is to protect the rights of individuals from, and society as a whole, from predators, from, predatory people, predatory institutions. We used to enforce laws that protected our small businesses. We used to have a small business landscape across America. I remember, as a young person walking around in Lansing or East Lansing or any town. I mean, I traveled all over the country, hitchhiked out to San Francisco in '68. You would visit a small town or any town, and you knew where you were. It was the Lansing Bank and the Jacobson's Furniture Store and Johnson's Five and Dime and the local bookstore, the Book Nook Books. And they've all been replaced by national chains, right? Now it's Barnes and Noble or Olive Garden or Marriott, and that's it, and Wells Fargo or Chase. We passed laws against this, and Reagan stopped enforcing them. In 1983, Reagan explicitly stopped enforcing our antitrust laws. No president since then, until Joe Biden just 2 weeks ago issued an executive order saying, let's start enforcing these laws again. Nobody had been enforcing them. We once enforced laws that said if a church or a religious leader was preaching politics in the pulpit, they would lose their tax-exempt status. But TV and radio turned a bunch of preachers into millionaires, and the greedy ones among them reached out to politicians and said, hey, let's cut a deal. In fact, the broker for that deal back in the 1980s was the Christian advisor to the Reagan administration and the Reagan-Bush campaigns, a fellow by the name of George W. Bush. And he created this mind meld between these right-wing preachers and the Republican Party that lasts to this day. And as a result, because of this corruption of our churches by politics, exactly as James Madison predicted, churches in America are in free fall, and it's not just because of COVID, because Americans have become cynical about religion. And people like Pat Robertson and Franklin Graham are fabulously rich beyond your imaginings. Pat Robertson is now a billionaire. We have enforced laws. We once enforced laws that required rich people and profitable corporations to pay their fair share of taxes, so that average working people's taxes were low. And I'm going to get into a story that really backs this up in just a minute. But basically greedy people and their businesses they ran bought a bunch of politicians, eventually bought the entire Republican Party and a mansion cinema little piece of or good-sized piece, actually, the Democratic Party, and thus drilled literally thousands of holes into our tax code so that billionaires now pay between 1% and 3%, the equivalent of income taxes, on their wealth. And, you and I are paying 30%, 20, 30%, whatever it may be. And the GOP now is fighting appropriating money to pay auditors with the IRS to catch these billionaire tax cheats and big corporations. We once enforced our laws that required a semblance of fidelity among our courts to the Congress that wrote those laws. We once had courts that enforced those laws. Now we've got courts that are packed with right-wing stooges who have been put there by nonprofits funded by billionaires, specifically to act in the interests of the billionaires, telling us that, corporations are people and money is speech, and no, there's no race problem in the United States, and if states want to pass laws again, it just goes on and on. We once had a workforce that was largely protected by democracy in the workplace, something that we call unions. Now we've got a majority of the states that have gone to right to work for less laws. And unionization is at 6% in the private sector in America. And by the way, when I was researching this topic for this rant that I was writing yesterday afternoon, and you Google right to work, and the first 20, 30 hits that you get are all right-wing sites talking about unions are bad, unions are predatory, right to work means you don't be forced, blah-de-blah-de-blah. It's insane. We once had free or nearly free college and trade school for all Americans who wanted it. And then Reagan ended free college in California as the governor, and then he became president and basically ended free college all across the United States. And now you've got an entire generation so crushed by debt, by student loan debt, that they can't afford to buy a house, start a family, have children, start a small business.
This is something, by the way, that is not happening in any other developed country in the world. No other developed country in the world has an entire generation with $1.5 trillion in debt from just going to damn college or trade school. We once had laws requiring hospitals and health insurance companies to be nonprofits. I remember back in the early 70s, I was running a company in Michigan. We had an herbal tea company and potpourris and smoking mixtures and all kinds of stuff. It was called Woodley Herber. And I was paying, at my recollection, and I'm pretty sure I'm pretty clear about this, we were paying $30 per month per person for full comprehensive Blue Cross Blue Shield health insurance. Because Blue Cross Blue Shield in Michigan was nonprofit, and all 3 hospitals in Lansing, St. Lawrence, Sparrow, and Ingham Medical were all nonprofit. And Nixon and Reagan worked to blow those laws up, and now $30 won't even cover the copay to get your temperature taken at your doctor's office. We once had an election system where people were only removed from the voting rolls if they died or if they moved out of state. Now you've got a situation where, Jeb Bush removed 94,000 African Americans from the voting rolls just in time for his brother's election in 2000, which is how George won Florida. And Brian Kemp purged 340,134 mostly African Americans from the voting rolls so that he could beat Stacey Abrams by 55,000 votes in 2018. And now you've got 17 states that have passed laws, 28 laws, making this entirely legal. The Apostle Paul wrote to his follower Timothy that they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, for the love of money is the root of all evil. But today, the love of money is celebrated. Billionaires are our new rock stars, our astronauts. Tax dodging means you're smart, and people crushed by debt and struggling to get by without decent wages and benefits are mocked as losers and takers. Our government has been corrupted by big money. There is one piece of legislation in Congress right now that would take a bite out of that would offer public funding and financing of elections and would reduce the power of big money, dark money in our elections. And that's the For the People Act, which is being filibustered right now by Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and maybe a few others. This is what Ted Kennedy had to say about this situation. He was talking specifically, they were trying to raise the minimum wage from $5.50 an hour to $7.25 an hour. And this is what he said on the floor of the United States Senate. Come on, you.
$240 billion in tax breaks for corporations, $36 billion in tax breaks for small businesses, increase in productivity, 42% over the last 10 years. But do you think there's any increase in the minimum wage? No. What is the price? We ask the other side. What is the price that you want from these working men and women? What cost? How much more do we have to give to the private sector and to business? How many $billion more are you asking? Are you requiring? When does the greed stop?
There you go. Ted Kennedy, the liberal lion of the Senate. Amazing. And then I got to tell you, maybe I'll move this into the third hour. We've, Governor Spencer Cox of Utah is speaking out, and the Biden stimulus is financing Republican tax cuts for the rich. It's mind-boggling. It's just another variation on that. I'll get into that in the third hour. The second hour is going to be Congressman Khanna, and I will be picking up your calls right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It is Anything Goes Friday, and when does the greed stop? And welcome back. Pat in Sacramento. Hey, Pat, you guys got the heat a couple days ago, didn't you?
We've had quite a bit of heat.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I just wanted to, I had an idea about the judges giving sanctions in Michigan to the people that filed the frivolous lawsuits.
Oh,
Glenn
yeah.
Wood.
Yeah, this is getting, I think the only person who's been seriously covering that is Rachel Maddow in the mainstream media, but she's been doing a great job of it.
they should really cover it more. And I was thinking maybe one of the sanctions could be that every single one of those lawyers had to go on TV in the state of Michigan. I don't know if she can enforce it anywhere else, and apologize to the American people for lying to them.
Or if they can't do, if we can't do that, we could put them in the stocks. The stocks is where they would, you put your head through the hole and you put your arms through the hole and you stand, you're kind of locked down there for a few hours.
One of the restitutions should be apologizing to all the people that they've lied to and all the people they've affected by this. That was just an idea.
I absolutely agree, and I think that's a brilliant idea, and I am totally supportive of it. Pat, thank you. That's a good one.
Thank you.
I like it. Time for the stocks. if no apology is forthcoming. Paul in Lucerne, California. Hey, Paul, thanks for watching us on Free Speech. What's up?
Hey, Tom. I just finished your book, Cracking the Code. Awesome book. I learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I wrote that book, 12 years ago? I think I would, I would tweak it a little bit today, but it's still a lot of good, solid content in it. So, what's up?
It's a great book. Well, in this book, I figured out communication is subconscious.
Most of it, yeah.
You. Yeah. So when we say redirect, when we say redistribute wealth, people are subconsciously hearing stealing. Taking something from somebody and giving it back to somebody else. They don't like it. They don't know why they don't like it. They just don't like it.
Well, that's why redistribute wealth is a phrase that the right uses, not the left.
Right. So we use redirect wealth.
No.
People like that.
Well, actually, I'm not sure what we use.
We should be using redirect wealth. I got over 14,000 followers, and I've thrown that out there, and 100% people like that better than redistribute wealth.
Yeah.
And it was a fairly decent survey. It was 300-something people participated in it.
I would instead say something like, support working people, or establish
that's what redirect wealth
social
means.
safety net.
What it does is you use your tax code to force rich people to redirect their wealth back into the corporations by paying better wages and better, safer working conditions. You do that by raising the tax code. If you raise the tax code to 50% or better after $3 million, they're not going to want to pay that, and that's what we used to do. That's how we used to.
Yeah, that's how it was pre-1980.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, before Ronald Reagan, exactly. And we used the tax code. Forced rich people to redirect their wealth. It forced people to open up companies that were losing money for tax write-offs. All kinds of different things happened. That's why we had a prosperous middle class, because we forced rich people to redirect their wealth by using the tax code. We need to do that again. That's how we had the most prosperous middle class in our country. The tax code was a big part of that.
Well, it was the most prosperous up until the 1980s. We had the most prosperous middle class in the world. Right now, China does. Oddly enough.
Yeah, well, that's the most prosperous country in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they're making their money selling stuff to us. It's manufacturing our things. Paul, thank you for the call. Spot on. I like it. Redirect. 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be back in just 1 minute with your calls on Anything Goes Friday. It's our hour together. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So for our Thom Hartmann Insider videotape that is over, or videotape, YouTube, whatever you want to call it, private video that's available over at ThomHartmann.com, I'm talking this week about Donald Trump just completely giving in to Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, the dictator of Turkey now, and this theory that Jared Kushner okayed the killing, at least the capture, perhaps the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and to Mohammed bin Salman, and that Erdogan has the tape of it. And that when he called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land, that he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or two later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating. Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday. Russ in Hickory Hill, Illinois. Hey, Russ, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, you know, before I get to my rant, I agree with the unions. I got hired in 1971 on a beer job. We paid $2 a month for eye, dental, and doctor for your whole family.
Wow.
But why I call? Yeah.
And
yeah,
the union was
$2,
probably paying
$3
$20 a month. You were probably paying a piece of that, right?
Well, you know, I don't know, our union dues.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but you got eye, dental, and doctor.
Yeah.
But what I called, you know, we listen to these right-wingers in that. What 2 states ain't doing the voting rights? You always hear 48 states, and we all know, Tom, there's 25 states that are never going to enact no voting rights restrictions. Because I tell you right now, like you said, Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, the sentiment in Illinois, they be gone after 2024 because Howard Dean said that too. He might win, but he's not going to be a Democrat no more after 24, and she's not going to win.
We'll see. Yeah, I think Kristen Sinema has just destroyed her own political career. But
what 2 states are though, Tom? Do you know?
What? I beg your pardon?
What 2 states are not enacting voting rights? You always hear 48.
Oh,
we have 50.
I frankly don't know. But they're not enacting. In 48 states, voter suppression laws have been proposed in their legislatures. They've only passed 17 states. There are 23 states that in all probability will have them by the end of next month, given the legislative calendars and schedules and things. Typically, I think that there's roughly 30 states that are solidly Republican controlled and around 20 states that are solidly Democratically controlled. There's actually 6 or 8 states that are kind of in between that go back and forth. So those numbers are not, clearly accurate. But right now, the majority of states numerically are controlled by Republicans, and that's why they control the Senate. And the reason that they control the majority of the states is because back in the 70s, the Republican Party made a very strategic decision to move into low population red states where with small investments, just a few $1 million, for a few $1 million, you can do in Wyoming or in Montana what would cost $100 million to do in California or New York. So they moved into these small states, population-wise, where the media markets were very inexpensive and invested heavily in local right-wing talk radio, in local media, in buying local newspapers, taking them over, running right-wing editorials, building out local what they call policy institutes, state policy institutes, local right-wing think tanks that then get letters to the editor and op-eds published in all the local newspapers. And they solidly took over these states. And it was a brilliant strategy that right-wing billionaires put together as a result of the Powell memo in 1971, and that's what we're living with. And the question is, how long is it going to take, or what's it going to take for people to wake the hell up? And I think that there's a possibility, and in fact, I've been thinking about writing one of my op-eds next week about this, that if you look at what very often historically has brought down cults, typically religious cults, but sometimes political cults as well, it has been disease. Down in Mexico, for example, when Cortez marched into, I'm forgetting the name of the city, but in Central America, and took down, and as I recall, the guy's name was Quetzalcoatl, the Mayan or Incan king. More than half, I think it was 80 or 90% of the city had died from the flu that preceded him, which he brought to that country. And so what had happened is people who thought that this guy, the leader of their country and of their religion, was a descendant of the god, they lost their faith in him and basically fled. And so Cortez, with just a couple of dozen men, was able to conquer literally an entire nation and take home ships full of gold. So I think that as this virus starts wiping out red states and people realize that, Fox News and Tucker Carlson and these guys on the right and Donald Trump have been lying to them all this time about, it's just a bad flu and it's nothing to worry about, and, you don't need the vaccine and it's going to, it's a bad thing. I think they're going to wake the hell up because they and their friends are dying around them or getting terribly, terribly sick. And that's going to be the toast for the Republican Party. Now, their bet, Russ, the Republicans' bet, is that that's going to so harm the economy, it's going to slow down our economy, that people will throw out the Democrats in 2022. We'll see which way it goes. Russ, thanks a lot for the call. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls right after this break on Anything Goes Friday.
Our book today is The End of the Myth, From the Frontier to the Border Wall in the Mind of America by Greg Grandin. And this is from Chapter 1, titled All That Space. The British colonies in North America were conceived in expansion. America was an aspiration, an errand, and an obligation born out of violent Christian schism and Europe's interminable religious and imperial conflicts. Depending on the intricacies of their particular interpretations of Revelation, the Protestants who settled New England might have understood flight across the Atlantic as a way of escaping European war, or they might have seen migration as a chance to open a new front and win those wars on a new soil. Here in the 1600s, in the eschatological nebula of the New World, was the first paradoxical image of America as simultaneously pristine and despoiled, empty and at the same time filled with primitives begging for deliverance, subordinated to Catholic Spain, which had conquered its part of the Americas a century earlier and stood as the great obstacle to Reformation England's rise as a world power. All yell and cry with one voice, Libertia, Libertia, Richard Hakluyt, a clergyman and court minister, wrote in the late 1500s, hoping to convince investors and his queen to establish an American colony. As Puritan society frayed under the harsh conditions of settler life, the frontier threatened and beckoned. The dark woods were filled with witches, and they were witchy, inviting hither. The forest was the place where the community could be redeemed and given new purpose, a chance to once again start anew, or it could be a place of more sorrows, wilderness sorrows, as two early Puritan patriarchs described the hardships that awaited those who ventured into uncharted territory, where whatever solidarity existed would be smashed into atoms as settlers scattered to escape the rule of the clergy. People are ready to run wild into the woods again and to be as heathenish as ever, warned Increase Mather. Expansions could be, often in the same sermon, held up as the cause of and the solution to the difficulties of establishing Christian communities. Either way, Native Americans had to get out of the way. They could die. They waste, they molder away, they disappear, said one Puritan chronicler of indigenous people who had succumbed to European pestilence years before the arrival of the Mayflower in 1620, thus clearing the earth for the establishment of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. God made way for his people by removing the heathen and planting them in the ground, said another observer. They could be murdered. The holy terror unleashed by the Puritans was, according to the historian Bernard Bailyn, driven by fears of what could happen to civilized people in an unimaginable wilderness and fears of racial conflicts in which God's children were fated to struggle with pitiless agents of Satan, pagan antichrists swarming in the world around them. Survivors could be enslaved. The first patent granted in colonial America in 1626 was to a Virginia merchant and planter, William Claiborne, for inventing a device that would not just restrain Indians, but also make them work. Claiborne was given an Indian to experiment on for the trial of his invention. Colonial records do not say what this innovation might have been, only noting that it was not successful. Or they could be pushed further and further west. The prodigious and relentless population, complained New Orleans Spanish governor in 1794, progressively drives the Indian nations before them and upon us, seeking to possess for itself this vast continent which the Indians occupy between the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Appalachian Mountains. More than a century and a half later, writing in the early 1950s, the Mexican author and diplomat Octavio Paz made much the same point. America was, he writes, if anything, geography, pure space, open to human action. Since it lacked historical substance, ancient social classes, established institutions, religions, and hereditary laws, reality presented no obstacles other than natural ones. Men struggled not against history, but against nature. And wherever there was an historical obstacle, indigenous societies say, it was simply erased from history, reduced to a mere natural fact and dispensed with accordingly. Evil is outside, part of the natural world, like Indians, rivers, mountains, and other obstacles that must be domesticated or destroyed. End of quote. The American Revolution is a permanent revolution, Paz went on, a nonstop expulsion of, quote, all elements foreign to the American essence and a constant invention of itself. And anything that stands in the way of that invention, anything that is in any way irreducible or inassimilable to perpetual creation, be it Native Americans, Spanish America, or history itself, quote, is not American. Quote, in other places, the future is one of man's attributes because we are men. We have a future. In Saxon America, the process is inverted and the future determines the man. We are men because we are the future, and everything that has no future is not a man. End of quote. The United States, Paz said, offers no room for contradictions, ambiguity, or conflict. The nation flies forward swiftly as if weightless across the land. Trying to stop North Americans moving west, Stephen Austin, the founder of Texas, said over a century earlier, was like trying to stop the Mississippi with a dam of straw. The drive west waxed and waned and burst forward with great passion during key moments. The book, The Edge of the Myth, by Greg Grandin.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Over at ThomHartmann.com, we have our newsletter, our regular newsletter that Sue puts together every day. It's got a link in it to every single article that I talk about on the air. So you can see, the backup for everything that I have to say. It's free. There's some ads in it that just, pay for it, basically. But that's it. There's that. And then, of course, over at HartmannReport.com, also no charge, there is our daily rant. So those are two things on the internet that we have. We also, periodically put up videos specifically for the people who are supporters of our program. And you can find our most recent one. It's about guns. This sheriff in Volusia County, the sheriff deputy there, asking the media, where have we gone wrong when a 14-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy are having a shootout with deputies? And Texas passing this bizarre new gun law. Anyhow, it's all over at ThomHartmann.com. You can find it right there. Check it out. Welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday. Jason in Homestead, Florida. Hey, Jason, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Yes, I'm just calling to say that I have learning differences, and I have little experience on the actual call-in shows. I've only done 2 actually calling into shows in my whole life. So I just want to put that out there for everybody that experiences our conversations and your show and everything and stuff. And
it's all good, Jason. So what was your point? What'd you call about?
Okay, well, I was just getting to that, and just 3 things real quick. And the other thing is to apologize for the previous call I had, where I called out a group of people without knowing that a whole group of people.
It's all good, Jason. What's on your mind today?
Oh, okay. Well, I was calling also about there's an invention that was out, because I watch an invention show. I'm kind of trying to become an inventor myself. Mm-hmm. And within the show, it was talking about a new restraint device that they come up with that I can't see how it could be lethal, but maybe it is, that is based upon for authorities, for law enforcement and so forth. Uh-huh. And he was talking about trying to pitch it to, and it's a small business as well, so it relates to your topic today. And it comes from the BOA idea. I don't know if you remember that. You're old enough.
Bolos was the stick on the string that you throw and it wraps around people?
Exactly. It has the big balls at the end and everything. Yeah. And what they did is they invented a device, I don't want to say a gun, but a device that shoots it out, or however you want. I guess I'll just use it those. I don't like those terminologies, but shoots it out, and it doesn't have balls at the end. Instead, it has small alligator clips, and they wrap around the person, and the person can't flee anymore.
So it's like being attacked by Velcro.
Yeah, exactly. Being attacked, and you know the invention quality that it takes to figure that out is like amazing to me, because they were saying how long it took, but it will stop a person running.
Yeah.
And
that's fascinating.
my point about that is to warn people of this, you know, so maybe they can contact the police departments. But why the heck can't we use stuff like that?
Yeah, we really do need more non-lethal ways to deal with people. And the astonishing thing, I saw this on CNN a week or so ago, the average police officer in the United States gets 6 hours of de-escalation training and over 42 hours of training in the use of firearms. And that's just like so wrong. I mean, that's just like so wrong. Jason, thank you. That was great. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I loved your opening rant.
Thank you.
And when the Supreme Court can gut our voting rights in our country, destroying Section 5, 4, and 2, they are just asking for us to appoint more justices.
I agree.
15 justices should be on the court. Or we can impeach Amy Coney Barrett for perjuring herself twice and impeach Clarence Thomas. It's not all right that his wife, Judy, helped fund the insurrectionists, paying for those Trump terrorists, their transportation and their hotels. And then
something that has largely vanished from the media, by the way. Ginny Thomas and her organization's participation in that is just like, it's gone, which is amazing. But yeah. I'm with you, Jessica. This is just so wrong.
And for Anything Goes Friday, I have to do handcuffs. If Kevin McCarthy ignores his subpoena, we need to bring him in handcuffs and not let him carry them like Weisselberg got to carry him down the hall.
Maybe we could use that Velcro thing that Jason was just telling us about and wrap up their legs. Yeah, I'm with you. Jessica, thank you. That was great. Peter in Dothan, Alabama. Hey, Peter, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's up?
I was thinking about how the state's legislators will have where they can select their committees to take and choose who won the elections. Mm-hmm. And I haven't heard anything about how are they going to prove this. And I hope they'll show the citizens or the American people the discrepancies if they find any of this. And then I'm just kind of curious about. Well,
just to directly answer that, Peter, the law in Georgia and that they're trying to replicate in Texas and other places has taken the administration and oversight of the elections away from the Secretary of State, somebody who is elected and answerable to the people, and put it in the hands of the legislature, of the Republican partisans in the legislature. So basically, the Republican Party gets to decide which votes are going to be counted and which ones aren't. And so if they've got a lot of votes coming in from, say, Fulton County, predominantly black in Atlanta, and that gives a win to, let's say, Stacey Abrams next year against Brian Kemp, then if that happens to be the race, then they can simply say, we think that 28,000, she just won by 27,000 vote margin. We think that 28,000 of those are fraudulent. And that's all, basically, that's all they have to do is say, we are concerned. And so those votes get set aside as if they were provisional ballots, and people have to show up in person and prove that they are actually who they are and that they actually did that vote. And they may not even bother to let those people know. So, obviously, it's like this is Jim Crow. I mean, this is rigging elections.
Yeah, and it would certainly be nice to see how they're going to take and show this to the people, because there's, they talk about this and that, and we don't see any of the evidence, and it'll be like the same results as what they'll come up with in Arizona. And, it certainly would be nice if they put as much effort into restricting voting rights as they would into the gun laws and our gun rights.
Right.
And I think a lot of people would be upset if they started putting all the restrictions on the gun rights like they are for the voters.
Yeah, I'm with you. Peter, thank you. Yes, and make it, buying a gun, make that like trying to get an abortion, right? You got to wait 3 days. You've got to go through an invasive exam where they stick things inside your body. You've got to watch a video of people being shot up. Whatever. John in Bradenton, Florida? It's Bradenton, Florida, right? With a T?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hey, John, what's
Florida.
up? Thanks for listening to WMNF.
Yeah, gladly. I know we talked about it a lot on the show of corporate greed, but, you know, you start looking at the numbers. Home Depot announced not too long ago a $20 billion stock buyback. They have 500,000 employees. That would have given each employee $40,000, which would have been better for the economy.
Wow. Yeah. And the only reason that they do the stock buybacks is so that the stock price immediately jumps because they're paying their senior executives with stock as well as with cash. And so this is a way of basically increasing the bonuses for the senior executives and for the large shareholders, of course, who
exactly. Yeah. Mutual funds and the like. But, you know, they got us on the flip side is because, you know, we have to manage our own IRAs and 401ks. Yeah. So on the flip side, it kind of benefits us if the stocks go up and our 401k goes up. So they kind of got you coming and going on stock buybacks. Yeah, you're right. And so, you know, but it's a pernicious, you know, evil practice that should not be allowed. I'm with you. Exactly. John, thank you for that. Thank you for that contribution to today's program. Chris in Littleton, Colorado. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, a few greedy billionaires and a few paid-off Republicans want to steal the right to vote and democracy.
They don't just want to, they're doing it right in front of us.
Yeah, from 360 million Americans. Yeah. The people need to exercise their rights to peacefully protest. They need to boycott companies that fund voter suppression. And they join voting rights groups and show up in record numbers in 22 and 24 and throw these clowns right out of office. Yeah, I'm with you, Chris, and I am hopeful that that's what happens. One of the problems is if, you know, lots and lots of people show up to vote, and then when they get up to the polling place, you know, get into the front of the line after 5 hours in line, they're told, I'm sorry, you've been removed from the voting roll because, you know, one of these laws, these 17 states that have now passed these laws, soon to be 23 to 28 states, probably next week. These laws say that, you know, the state officials can just remove you from the voting rolls out of the belief that you might not be on there illegally or the belief that you might have moved out of state. And somehow that just happens to happen an awful lot in Black and Hispanic communities. What a surprise, you know, and Native American communities and whatnot. Is there any way to disqualify these officials that are doing this undemocratic
Yes, you pass a federal law that establishes standards for how elections are run so that elections are fair and transparent. And that's the For the People Act. And what is standing in the way of that right now is Joe Manchin, among other things, you know, and probably Kyrsten Sinema. We haven't heard from her in a few weeks. But that's what's standing in the way of it. And that it's going to take federal law. Federal law preempts state law. And the Constitution explicitly gives Congress the right to regulate federal elections. Arguably, a state could still have a state-only election where they can do skeezy stuff. But if we were to pass the For the People Act, since most elections have some federal component to them, you know, a senator, a House member, whatever, they would apply in every state. Chris, I got to run, but thank you for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Speaking the truth, the right-wing billionaires and multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Lewis in Berkeley, California. Hey, Lewis, do they still call it Berserkly?
Well, I haven't heard it called that.
I heard that when I was staying in Berkeley back in 1968, so it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, what's up?
Well, I just wanted to talk to you about the idea of the boycott. Mm-hmm. Since, you know, capitalism has shaped the way Americans live and breathe, and in the past 40, 50 years, I think we have all forgotten that rusty old tool in the toolbox called the boycott. And it was amazingly effective back in the late 50s and 60s
Against what? I recall the grape boycott, but even that didn't actually financially harm the grape producers. What it did was got enough publicity that it shamed them into allowing the American Farm Workers Union, Cesar Chavez's union, to exist essentially. But I don't know of any other successful boycotts in my lifetime. Do you?
Yeah, there's the boycotts of the lunch counters and the transportations down there in.
Oh yeah, okay. City. Well, yes, that was
but
fighting.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you're right. If nothing else, it does shame. It's a very effective shaming tool.
Yeah, yeah.
And
so where would you focus that?
It is. Well, I think we need. We need something like Boycott Central that is the clearinghouse of, who is giving money to what. Yeah. We need to know who is funding this insurrection party.
Well, that's why if the For the People Act was passed, it requires disclosure of those kinds of contributions. That's one of the reasons why the Koch network and other right-wing billionaires are working so hard to defeat it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking that it's a very powerful tool in the, so to speak, capitalist world, in their realm.
Yeah, and I don't think, that we should ignore it, Lewis. I'm with you. I've generally kind of poo-pooed boycotts, but I think you're making a good point. And the most recent example, a couple of weeks ago, Toyota came out and said, we're going to continue giving money to Republicans who promoted an insurrection, Republican politicians, because we don't care about politics. We really just care about Republicans doing things that'll help Toyota. And there was so much blowback. I tweeted, that I've owned Toyota cars for years and own one right now, a plug-in hybrid. And I said, that's my last Toyota car. And, literally thousands of people read that and retweeted it and added to it. And then you had across the country organizations stepping up and saying, okay, we're done with Toyota. Thank you very much. See you later, guys. And then Toyota reversed their position last week, and they came out and said, okay, no more money for the Republican, traders. And by the way, they started running this huge ad campaign. I'm seeing it in particular over in the Financial Times, which had reported on this. But, talking about how they are the company with the most, Sean, that's way too loud. They are the company with the most electric cars.
I was really glad to see that outcome with Toyota because I am also a Toyota fan. And I was really upset to hear their first statement. I was really glad to see the turnaround.
Yeah, me too. And that's an example of what you're talking about working. Lewis, I got to run, but thank you for the call. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. 9 years before the oligarchs of the South declared war against the North because they wanted to preserve slavery. In fact, they wanted to impose slavery in the North. Many of these guys that these monuments have been built to just came right out and said it. 9 years before that began, Frederick Douglass gave a speech saying, what to the slave is the 4th of July? A good and important question. It continues to be a question because slavery is still legal in the United States. The 13th Amendment said that slavery can only exist under the color of law. If somebody is charged or convicted of a crime, then they can be held as a slave. And it's still going on in the United States. In fact, it's the main reason why we have more prisoners than any other country in the world, free labor. And then on top of that, we find that the police departments that get more 1033 equipment, they kill more people. Check it out at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday. In the next hour, we will have Congressman Khanna taking your calls for the hour. Gary in Naples, Florida. Hey, Gary, this has got to be, my rant today has to be right up your alley. Greed?
Thank you. I'm going to I like to quote FDR once more, but before I do that, yes. You know, it's not an ego thing, but in my heart, that'd be a great title for a book. Greed Has No Heart. I couldn't find anybody better to. Yes, think about this. The co-author of that book than you, because I really think that would touch America's conscience. And we need, if you will, educate America about greed. Greed is really just as much. I think people think of it in terms of money. It is, but it's more than that. It's how you treat people and how you administer government. That's the cancer. We don't know how to administer government.
Yeah, I'm with you, Gary. I'm absolutely with you. And in fact, yesterday.
Think about that. Greed Has No Heart for your next book. I'll co-author it with you. Seriously.
Okay.
I probably won't happen, but I think it's got a real. I think that title has a real shot.
Well, yesterday when I
came up with.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Pardon me? No, that's all right. Not because I came up with it, but when we listen to the line of the Senate, the late Ted Kennedy, and the forceful vote, that is a dynamic that's a dying breed, and that shouldn't have to be. There has to be other people come before the public. And in closing, could I quote FDR? This is my favorite quote, because this is about the philosophy of greed. Government can err. Presidents can make mistakes. But we are told that divine justice weighs the sins of the cold-blooded and the sins of the warm-hearted on a different scale. Better the occasional fault of a government living in the spirit of charity than the consistent omissions of a government frozen in its own indifference. That's the philosophy of greed.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Sean, I'm going to play this out of the 360. Here's your FDR quote for the day, then, Gary. And I think it's, as I recall, I haven't played this clip in a while, but as I recall, this is apropos to your topic.
Taxes, after all, are the dues that we pay for the privilege of membership in an organized society. And as society becomes more civilized, government, national and state and local, is called on to assume more obligations to its citizens. The privileges of membership in a civilized society have vastly increased in modern times. But I am afraid we have many who still do not recognize their advantages and want to avoid paying their dues.
There you go. There you go. Gary, I got to run, but thank you. It's great comments. John in Santa Cruz. Hey, John, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. I just wanted to talk about I'm kind of depressed about the pandemic. It seems like it's just going to go back to the way it was. What's your opinion on that?
It is among non-vaccinated people, and in my opinion, this is the Republican plan. Their intention, and the reason that they have been working so very, very hard, and if you have any doubts about that, go over to MediaMatters.org, to that website where they're documenting all the Fox News lies about the coronavirus. It's not just Fox News. This is right across right-wing media. You can also go to thewriting.com with an R, not W, and see all these headlines. And the reason that they've been working so hard at encouraging people not to get vaccinated and to go out without masks is they want massive widespread illness in the United States. Only a small percentage of people die, right? It's only around 1 or 2%. But they want massive widespread illness across the United States to slow down the economy, to crash the stock market, to hurt the Democrats, because there's an election coming up in a year and a half, and or even less than a year and a half. It's a year and, 4 months. And that's what they're all about. They're, as I said I think it was on Tuesday, death is their strategy. And it's criminal. It's criminal. It's breathtaking and it's criminal. So, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's like, what are we going to do about it? It looks like things are just going to go back to the way they were.
We have to vaccinate everybody. And my hope is that as this starts to sweep, I'm seeing it here in Oregon, for example. Every day I get an email from the Oregon Department of Health that lists how many people died, how many people were diagnosed, and in which counties. And Multnomah County, Portland, we had like 22 people diagnosed yesterday. But we've got other counties, these red counties around us that are 30, 35, 40, higher numbers of diagnoses because nobody's vaccinated. Very few people are vaccinated in those counties. And now the hospitals are starting to fill up again. The ICUs are starting to fill up again in those areas that aren't vaccinated. It's not hitting the cities, the heavily vaccinated cities, quite as badly. It's not, but it is hitting the areas that went for Donald Trump in the last election, and it's hitting them hard, and it's going to continue to until they start getting vaccinated. And keep in mind, it takes 6 weeks after your first shot before you've got enough immunity to deal with this stuff. So, I mean, this is a full-blown crisis, which is exactly what the Republicans wanted, and now they've got it. John, I got to run. Thank you for the call. We will be back. Congressman Ro Khanna is going to be with us for the full next hour, taking your calls in a National Progressive Town Hall meeting. He's vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
Our book for the book report today. Our book for the book report today is Taking Bullets, Terrorism and Black Life in 21st Century America, Confronting White Nationalism, Supremacy, Privilege, Plutocracy, and Oligarchy, a Poet's Representation and Challenge by Haki R. Madhubuti. He writes, this is from the chapter, page 27, the chapter Terror in the Midst of Prayer and Empire. In our perpetual state of national mourning, where our eyes are watered out and our hearts cease to heal at the rate the Creator meant them to, we hold hands in profound silence as we remember the Mother Emanuel 9 of Charleston, South Carolina, those 9 mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers. Even before burying, before black earth covered their caskets, too many ministers, media pundits, and plain white and black folks downgraded the terror that quickened their deaths of our finest in this land to the mental illness and race hatred, in quotes, of a single young white man. He may have acted alone, but he was not alone in his thinking, encouragement, gathering of arms, warped consciousness, confirmation, or ahistorical views, and yeses from the millions in the nation who proudly wear and display the Confederate flag above their hearts and fly it in all of its traitorous glory over a state capitol and other institutions. Again, we find ourselves at war with history and culture, entertaining another call for a national conversation on race and a president weary of trying to make sense of and comfort the grief-stricken nation with words from the highest office of the land. This was written while Obama was president. These are the facts, not an opinion or the ignorant ranting of compromised preachers and television pundits. A 21-year-old white man, a citizen of South Carolina, walked into the sacred and spiritual home of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston the historic home of black liberation fighter Denmark Vesey, and fatally killed 9 of its members, including the pastor, during Bible study. This was a pure act of domestic terrorism. A modern-day lynching by a young white nationalist who coolly and calmly assassinated 9 black members of Mother Emanuel. Domestic violence and acts of terrorism are on the rise in the United States, as detailed by Charles Kurzman and Daniel Schanzer in their New York Times op-ed, The Other Threat, where they state that, quote, the main terrorist threat in the United States is not from violent Muslim extremists, but from right-wing extremists, end quote. In their national research, local police agencies across the country identified, quote, the militias, neo-Nazis, and sovereign citizens as the major threat the nation faces in regard to extremism, end quote. All of this is homegrown with international connections. Morris Dees and J. Richard Cohen of the Southern Poverty Law Center also writes in the New York Times article, Racists Without Borders, that, quote, Americans tend to view attacks like the mass murder in Charleston as isolated hate crimes, the work of a deranged racist or a group of zealots lashing out in anger unconnected to a broader movement. This view we can no longer afford to indulge. When, according to survivors, Mr. Roof told the victims at the prayer meeting that black people were, quote, taking over the country, he was expressing sentiments that unite white nationalists from the United States and Canada to Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. Unlike those of the civil rights era, whose main goal was to maintain Jim Crow in the American South, today's white supremacists don't see borders. They see a white tribe under attack by people of color across the globe. The end of white rule in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and South Africa, they believe, foreshadowed an apocalyptic future for all white people, a white genocide that must be stopped before it's too late. End of quote. The internationalization of terrorism is not a foreign theory in today's social media world. Dees and Cohen will be speaking at a conference in Budapest about this transnational white supremacism that is emerging as the world grows more connected technologically. The message of white genocide is spreading. Also, David J. Whitaker's Terrorism, Understanding the Global Threat, gives another view. Clearly, our rush to forgive this mass murderer within 96 hours of this supreme tragedy is misguided, anti-human, and does not allow for properly grieving the fallen. As perfectly scripted, displaying the permanent effectiveness of Christian acculturation on the Sunday, June 21st, 2015 morning services of Mother Emanuel Church, the black Christians out-Christianed their white brothers and sisters. Before the morning sermon, the presiding elder, Reverend Norvell Goff Sr., found it necessary to thank the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies for doing their job. He also stated, quote, a lot of folks expected us to do something strange and break out in a riot. Well, they just don't know us. We are people of faith, end quote. I find this statement inappropriate, insensitive, and ahistorical, implying, whether he meant it or not, that the recent uprising and rebellions in Ferguson, New York, Cleveland, and other parts of the nation were riots and did not include black people of faith, and that somehow they were strange in their social, political, and economic activism. Informed people do not riot against injustice or white terrorism. They study, organize, and strategically struggle at all levels, in the streets, on the campus, in front of the White House, and in corporate boardrooms. Dylan Roof his stated intentions were to start a race war, and informed black leadership understands that we cannot pray this away or appeal to any law enforcement agency that all across the country, including Charleston, has been seriously compromised. To label black reaction to murder, terrorism, deep unemployment, substandard housing, etc., as riot is to blame the victim. The book, Taking Bullets.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. So let's have a national town hall meeting. Well, national, in the last week, we've had calls from, let's see, Israel, Mexico, Sweden, England. I'm missing one other country. There was one other country. Anyway, maybe even international. We'll see who calls. Congressman Ro Khanna is with us for the hour. He represents the 17th District of the 17th District of the state of California in the U.S. House of Representatives. Vice Chair or Vice President of the Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Hey, Congressman, welcome back.
Tom, great great to be back on. International audience, that's impressive.
Oh, yeah. It seems to be mostly people watching on YouTube all around the world. It's amazing. So before we pick up phone calls, what's on your mind right now? What are the things that you want people to be attending to, focused on, doing something about? And what are you guys up to?
The biggest thing is the climate legislation and the infrastructure bill. I mean, I think Senator Sanders did a phenomenal job to get that $3.5 trillion. It has a clean energy standard, massive investment in solar and wind. It has a civilian climate corps. It's going to have free community college, free preschool for every American, child care for every American, expanded Medicare with dental, vision, hearing. So I was joking with him. I said, you may have lost the presidential campaign and not be in the West Wing, but your policies are becoming law. And we just need to make sure that that doesn't get diluted, that they don't strip the climate provisions, that they don't lower the number, that they pay for it by taxing corporations and the wealthy. So that's the highest priority. And then I've been so focused, singularly focused as chair of the Oversight Committee to get these fossil fuel executives in. They've never had to come in before to answer on climate disinformation. We're going to have McCoy with the leaked video who bragged about killing climate legislation on behalf of Exxon. We're going to have him under oath, and then we're going to push to get these executives under oath. And I've got the buy-in of the chair of the Oversight Committee, so we're going to use whatever tool is necessary, and I think they're going to be explosive hearings in September.
Whoa. Okay. Looking forward to that. That should be very interesting. So, shall we pick up phone calls?
Absolutely.
Okay. Susan in Rockford, Illinois, you are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Thank you. I'll put my call out there and hang up for the answer. I work in healthcare at a hospital, and now when patients can't pay a bill, they just have them apply for a credit card that's 26.9% interest. My question is, can we write a bill to stop this predatory health care billing? It's bad enough they can't pay their hospital bill or they're sick. Now, here, apply for this credit card and pay 26.99% interest on top of the hospital bill you already can't pay.
Wow, and the hospital's probably getting spiffed for that.
Seems very predatory, worse than student loans. So can we write a bill? Would you sponsor a bill to stop that? It's through a Synchrony Bank in the East Coast.
Susan, do you know what hospital it is that's doing this? I'd love to look into that, and I think we do need to have the legislation. I don't know if you're still on the line.
She is.
If you're not,
if I said that, I repercussions from myself as an employee. But
well, I want to protect you.
The bank is Synchrony Bank out of, I think it's up in the East Coast.
Okay, I'm going to have my team, contact my office discreetly if you want to talk about it privately. But it is appalling to me. I mean, Tom, I saw your reaction that a hospital would be giving credit card applications to pay hospital bills. I mean, it's common knowledge that the biggest cause of bankruptcies in this country is medical debt. It's one of the biggest reasons I've supported Medicare for all. Not just the deaths that are being caused by people who don't get health care, but also the extraordinary medical debt. The few times in my life that someone has asked me to borrow money, it's been to pay off hospital bills. I mean, it's just outrageous. And but I'm going to look into this because the Oversight Committee has jurisdiction over these kind of issues. So I appreciate you raising it, and it's absolutely appalling.
Thomas in Dartmouth, Mass. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Fun, real quick, and I'll have an idea for you on the other side. Sit around and think of strategies on how to get Republicans.
Thomas, I can't hear you. I'm going to put you on hold. When you call in, you've got to, you can't be on speaker, or if you are, you have to have your mouth right next to your phone. Chuck, Thomas is on line 5, Joyce, if you want to check that out. Chuck in Eugene, Oregon, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, Congressman and Tom. A long-time listener of Tom, long time. I'm 70 years old, retired. And I am deeply concerned about the divide in this country and how, what us everyday people can do. Now, I live in a large, pretty nice apartment complex in Eugene, and I talk to various people here, and, there's retired high school teachers. There's
Chuck, forgive me moving you along here, but we need to get to your question for Congressman Khanna.
Okay. What I'm wanting to know is what can everyday people do to help unite this country? What I do is I talk about compassion. I think that hits both sides.
Yeah. So what can we do to bring people together? Good question, Chuck. Thank you.
Well, Chuck, thank you for your question, and thank you for your leadership on compassion. But I think you started out by saying something that was important, that you live in a community where there are truck drivers and where they're a working class. One of the challenges, in my view, is that there's too much distance between Americans that has increased. You have districts in areas like mine where there are companies with $11 trillion of market cap, but those software engineers aren't living with the service workers who clean up after them or take them to their workplace. They don't go to the same schools. They're not in the same neighborhoods. And then you have distance between places like Silicon Valley and rural communities and black and brown communities. I think if we had an agenda in this country that said we want to provide economic opportunity, education, and health care to everyone, including left-behind communities, and that we are not going to be a community that has distanced and siloed ourselves into different socioeconomic groups, that would go a long way in bringing some unity.
Thomas in Dartmouth, Mass. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Congressman Khanna, do you guys ever sit around thinking of strategies on how to get Republicans to vote for some of our policies that we want to get through? And I have a couple of ideas.
Tell me your ideas, Thomas.
First of all, there are 6 states in the southern part of the United States that are heavily red who rely on a government-subsidized electrical grid called the Tennessee Valley Authority. President Obama, during his term, threatened to privatize it, and that brought along a bunch of Republican senators to willing to work because the TVA is so vitally important to the industry in that region of the country. Second idea is everyone hates fraud and abuse in government. I think that we should audit the Social Security system in this country to weed out waste and fraud. And how we do that is to put a committee together, and we start with the state of Kentucky. Why do we start with the state of Kentucky? Because the state of Kentucky is Mitch McConnell's state, and it's the most heavily subsidized Social Security taking state in the union. Third, we also get the Commerce Committee to get Elaine Chao in front of it and bring her up on some types of charges for what she did as working as a transportation secretary under Donald Trump. We need to stop being passive and be aggressive with these guys, or otherwise people like Mitch McConnell only play games and lie to your face.
Okay, Thomas, thank you.
Well, Thomas, let me say on your first suggestion, I think that's a very good one. The Tennessee Valley Authority has been a model of success, a model of getting solar energy, renewable energy, of course, famously created during the New Deal, and a example of how government has succeeded. So I think getting buy-in, not just for that, but for that as a successful public model is important. And that's what we did with the Endless Frontiers. Schumer and I actually had bipartisan support with Senator Todd Young and Representative Gallagher to get that passed. Your second point, I am all for auditing, and I agree with you that some of the red states like Kentucky are more tax recipients than taxpayers. But my view is that where we really ought to be auditing is the ultra wealthy and the 1%. I mean, I don't want to go after a grandmother who claims an extra EITC or Social Security tax check. I want to go after the multimillionaires who aren't paying their tax.
Yeah, I heard on the radio this morning, $7 trillion over the next decade just from tax cheats by billionaires and corporations.
Unbelievable. Republicans don't want to beef up the IRS to go after them, and I think they're on the losing side. The politics have changed. People don't want to pay taxes, working class, middle class, but they want the rich, the ultra rich, to pay their taxes.
Amen.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Congressman Khanna taking your calls for the hour in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Mary in Mill Creek, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi. You know,
Excuse me, I'm a supporter of Whole Washington, which is the universal health care here in Washington State. And I've been a supporter of Medicare for All. However, after some heartfelt discussions with some family members who fled poverty from government corruptions, in South America and Mexico, I'm starting to get seriously concerned if it's prudent to trust our dysfunctional political system to really fairly implement those social programs. I'm concerned about us becoming, I believe in, I support in theory the concept of, getting education and health care covered as government programs. But if we become too dependent on that, what's going to happen with the corruption? I mean, I can't even imagine us being able to pass it, let alone implement it in a way that won't lead to the Donald Trumpers of this world just totally taking advantage of those programs and milking them. So we've got some big things coming up here in Washington State to promote Whole Washington. And I want to make sure that I'm not participating in something that's going to set us up to fail as a society. Do you have any insight?
It's a thoughtful question, and it's an important question. And because you asked it in good faith, I want to give you an answer that may be a little bit philosophical. But there are two fundamental themes of American democracy, and that is equality of opportunity and also equally important liberty as a citizen. And the countries you mentioned, some of them may have the aspiration for equality of economic opportunity with health care and education, but they lacked liberty. They didn't have political freedoms. They didn't have checks on the government with freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And so you have the potential of abuse when you have authoritarian governments that are trying to promote economic equality. John Rawls, the great political philosopher, said in America we need economic equality of opportunity, healthcare and education, coupled with one of his first principles of justice, political liberty. And what you're saying is, yes, I want healthcare, I want education, but I want to make sure government is functional, protecting those political liberties so it doesn't become abusive in that process. And you're absolutely right to highlight that. So we need both.
So we should be looking at countries that are highly functional in that regard, like Northern Europe, and not to, for example, Venezuela or poorer countries that aspire to these things, but they implement them very poorly for lack of resources or the presence of political corruption.
Yeah, and they've come to your point. They haven't had hundreds of years of more mature democracies. I mean, so they're still building that political culture of liberal democracy. But you're right. There are countries in the world that are liberal democracies and have a strong economic opportunity, which I think one of the things that Democrats never do is talk about freedom, right? Healthcare to me, Medicare, giving Medicare healthcare to everyone is about freedom. What freedom do you have if you have to worry about about your hospital debt? What freedom do you have if you don't have education? So I think there are two aspects of freedom: the political freedom, but also your economic freedom, and both are important.
Brilliant analysis. Brilliant analysis. We will be back with more of your calls for Congressman Ro Khanna in just a moment. I've got to read a commercial over on the commercial side of the program here. You'll hear a promo on this side, and we will be right back. Stick around. It's 20 minutes past the hour.
Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at ThomHartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So David Perry over at Medium.com put together a list of 38 reasons to investigate the Trump administration. Everything from the Russian influence over the 2016 election, to the Trump family's collusion with Russia, to Ivanka Trump's trademarks, to federal spending at Trump properties, to the civilians killed by Trump's drone strikes, to the Trump administration's role in turning the United States into the global epicenter for the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, we are. Yes, it's grim. Their decision to sideline the CDC, politicizing mask wearing just to try to get himself reelected, the number of people who died because the White House kept PPE from blue states, from Democratic-led states,
the contents of the Trump documents that Trump refused to release to the House Judiciary Committee and other committees, all the people who wouldn't speak, at all, ignoring subpoenas, violations of the Hatch Act, the deportation of COVID-positive immigrant families, illegal altering of records. Anyhow, there's a whole list. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back, Congressman Ro Khanna, Khanna.house.gov, KHANNA.house.gov on the internet, and Rep. Ro Khanna over on Twitter is taking your calls for the hour in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting. And Michael in Bronx, New York, you are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Thank you, Tom. Hello to you and hello to the congressman. Here's a big question, and I hope you can address this to your colleagues in Congress. I know Manchin and Sinema don't want to end the filibuster. Everybody keeps saying end the filibuster. Hasn't anyone discussed the possibility of just suspending the filibuster? It's a big difference from ending it, and that's the only way I can see to getting these particular bills and getting things done without Mitch McConnell and these Republicans constantly obstructing everything. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it just goes right back to what your earlier caller, Thomas, said about these Republicans and Mitch McConnell's lying to your face. I mean, they'd be fit to OJ's hit backstabbers, if you get my drift.
Well, Michael, I think you're absolutely right to look for exceptions to the filibuster. Many people have said, including Representative Clyburn, our majority leader, that at least have a voting rights exception to the filibuster. I mean, if you suspend it, I'd be for that, but that's basically en route to ending it, because if we suspend it, the other party would suspend it, or anyone would suspend it whenever they wanted. But if you said maybe you can suspend it for voting rights or have some provision to at least get voting rights through, that could be a compromise. And those of us on the progressive side have been willing to compromise. I mean, I'm for just eliminating it, but I said that would be a good compromise. But ultimately, we need the president to make the case to these moderate senators that their legacy, our party's legacy, is on the line.
Jim in Elkhart, Indiana, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Representative Khanna. I had something on my mind for quite a while now, and it's specifically to you, Representative. Is there not the power of committees in Congress to make recommendations to the Justice Department?
With regard to?
Well, my whole point is regarding Trump. In my opinion, he's a traitor to the country, and I don't know how what he does could be construed with free speech.
You're talking about like the findings of the Mueller report?
And he's a clear danger to the country.
Okay.
And my understanding from what Bob Mueller did, he did all the heavy lifting to outline obstruction of justice charges.
Yeah, at least 10 of them. Thank you, Jim.
Jim, I believe Congress has done the investigatory work. We recommended impeachment. We voted for impeachment. We have the reports. The reports are public. The Justice Department has those reports. But it's not our decision. It's not even the president's decision on what to do with it. That's the Justice Department, and I have confidence in Attorney General Merrick Garland to look at all of that and make a determination of what he thinks is prudent based on the law.
Reverend J.H. in New Haven, Connecticut. You are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi there. Good to see you. I'm going to try to read this question. Would you consider a bill for a uniform process for federal elections based on Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1, for an independent, impartial, nonpartisan commission of experts to count disputed votes and undisputed votes with automatic certification of votes once the disputed votes have been counted? In other words, take it out of the hands of the state legislatures, as that part of the Constitution says, and have an independent commission. What do you think about that, Congresswoman? And
Reverend J.H., that's a good idea. You know, one of the things that was shocking to me, someone was telling me this, it was a Bush versus Gore lawyer, and I have to go back and read the opinion, but he said in Bush versus Gore there was a line that people actually don't have a right to elect the president, that the right is with the Electoral College.
It says specifically there is no constitutional right of the people to elect the president of the United States.
Right. So, I mean, that's a shocking statement, right? I think we have to lead with that, because I think Americans would just be flabbergasted that that is the state of the current law, and that is the the problem, that if you don't believe that people have the constitutional right to elect the president, then these electoral colleges and these states can do a lot of shenanigans under constitutional law. So what you're talking about, I think, is important to have an independent commission. But what we really need in this country is a constitutional amendment that gives people the right to vote for the president. I mean, even short of abolishing the Electoral College, there should be something that affirms the sanctity of the individual vote in states.
Amen. Congressman Khanna is with us for the hour, taking your calls. We'll be back with more of your calls for him right after this break here at the bottom of the hour. He's the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House of Representatives. You can tweet him at Rep. Khanna.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And his website is Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that, though because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone and of his own accord would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president, and absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So people wonder, why militias all of a sudden? How is it that all kinds of Americans are showing up with assault weapons in the Capitol building trying to assassinate the Vice President of the United States and the Speaker of the House of Representatives and stop the counting of the presidential votes, the Electoral College votes? Where did this come from? You know, the last time we saw an armed uprising against the federal government in the United States was 1861. It was the Confederacy. Is this a Confederacy rising again? Well, yeah, there is a huge white supremacist element to it. In fact, I'd say it's one of the primary animating impulses. But what really got these things going, these militias going, was the Heller decision written by the opinion written by Anthony Scalia and published on June 26, 2008. And it has crazy language in it, basically begging for militias. I share it with you in a special video over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Congressman Ro Khanna is with us in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting. And let's see here, Jim in Las Vegas, you are on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yes, sir. My question is, I'm a teacher. School starts August 11th. My question is, should we consider making vaccinations mandatory now? Exactly what Tom has been saying is starting to happen today. The Southern Nevada Health District has made masks mandatory. An Elko councilman died. It's in the news today. I tweeted that to you. Should we consider now getting more aggressive before Congress goes on leave?
Jim, I think we have to. I think we have to require vaccinations. I'm really concerned about the fall when we have people go back to school. A lot of young people, of course, are not vaccinated yet. You have the Delta variant. You have the Lambda variant. You have this uncertainty in terms of the necessity for boosters. So there are a lot of variables at play, and we ought to be taking every measure we can to prepare for a fourth wave in the fall. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I don't want to be alarmist, but it would be foolish to not take every precaution, and that should include mandatory vaccination to go to school.
Mark in Woodstock, New York. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Congressman Khanna, my question is, can people who work with people with developmental disabilities be paid a living wage?
Mark, they should be. I think this is a very difficult question because I've heard from both sides on the disability community. Some people in the disability community want to have an incentive for them to be hired and an exception to the $15 wage. Others say no, they shouldn't be exempt. And I know this is a live debate where there are people of good faith on both sides, and it's something that we're trying to work through in the House of Representatives. So I don't think there's a easy one answer to that, and I think there maybe have to be some compromise that takes into consideration the broad range of perspectives of the disability community.
Rich in Indianapolis, Indiana. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, Tom. Nobody does it better, man.
Thank you.
You guys are the best. Representative Khanna, I was wondering, please, there was a news element yesterday in yesterday's news cycle about an IG report of the field office of Indianapolis, FBI field office, and the senior agent, Jay Abbott, having gross dereliction of duty. And because of that office's lack of response to the complaints against Larry Nassar, he was able to go on to harm another 70-plus people that were in his medical charge. Richard Blumenthal is trying to, bring this forward in the Senate, and I think this needs to be an all-hands-on-deck kind of a thing, because what you've got your hands on here, you've got your hands on the thread of something that is huge. I don't know how well read in you are to, excuse me, but you have the beginnings of something that is such deep wrong and spreads so widely that if this is permitted to get away, it will mean ages more of harm to this country.
Rich, thank you. Oh, sorry, I thought he was done. Congressman?
Rich, thank you for raising that. I am not aware of the details of that case, but after this call, we'll look into that, look into what Senator Blumenthal is doing and see how I can support his effort. But I agree with you, if there has been abuse and harm, it needs to be addressed, and there needs to be every precaution taken so it doesn't happen again.
Howard in Gaithersburg, Maryland. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm actually in Washington, D.C. at the moment. Okay. But my question has to do with the immigration reform policy. Is anyone considering a modification of the rules with regard to C or D visa classes? They're the only immigration class barred from adjustment, and we've got thousands of citizens in the United States who are married to former crewmen who have children, but they're not eligible to adjust.
I think we need to have a comprehensive solution to immigration, and that's it has to look at what the situation you're describing, where you have someone married to a citizen overseas or a foreigner, and what happens to them and their kids. It has to look at family reunification. It has to look at people who have been on visas here for years and have been waiting a decade for their green card. And it has to look at people who are trying to come here to do agriculture work, who are able to come to earn a paycheck and are being hired by the employers, but there's no repercussion and being underpaid, and to make sure that that situation isn't taking place where they're being exploited. So we need a comprehensive approach. Every politician says that, and we haven't been able to get there as a Congress. I'm hopeful under this president we'll be able to make progress.
Lorenzo in Chicago, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yeah, how are you guys doing? This is in regards to if there's a such thing as a presidential photographer. because I'm trying to figure out during the resurrection, the Capitol resurrection, isn't the photographer there in the office at all times? And does those pictures, isn't there pictures of what was going on during that time the president and whoever was in that office was there? Because I'm assuming that all you got to do is just have the presidential photographer show the pictures of who all was in that office, and you ask them what was going on during that time.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
Well, that's a good suggestion, and certainly we should look at that. We should look at the White House log. We should look at any records of meetings. I mean, obviously the president could have tried to keep some of them off the books, but anything that we can make public, that I don't think things like that are national security sensitive, we should, to try to understand what exactly went on.
Mike in Marshfield, Wisconsin, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hi, Rep. I'm just wondering why with the interpreters from Afghanistan, why we're not looking at allowing their families to come to the U.S. with them. And I ask because a friend of mine is from Afghanistan. He was an interpreter, and he's worried sick on a daily basis about his family and what's going to happen to them if they stay.
Mike, I appreciate that. This has been a huge issue of concern for me. As you know, I've advocated for withdrawal from Afghanistan, but I don't think we ought to do what we did in Vietnam, which was leave people there in certain cases for slaughter. We have to be generous in the amount of people we're willing to take. We have to expedite their processing into the United States and be specific about it. And several of us in the Progressive Caucus have been advocating with the administration to do exactly that, so that your friend who's a translator can come, and if he fears for his family, that his family can come as well.
David in Columbus, Ohio, you're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Representative Khanna, I have a quick question. Why is President Biden supporting Medicare Advantage instead of Medicare for All? I think this is a critical time we could pass Medicare for All.
David, I agree with you. I think at the very least he ought to support what he ran on, which is Medicare expansion to 60. I mean, my view is once we start expanding it, then we're going to get momentum for Medicare for All. People forget Bernie Sanders' plan was over 4 years. It would have gone to 55, 45, 35, and then everyone. And so I think the key fight for us is to say we've got to expand it both horizontally and vertically. By that I mean horizontally, we got to have more benefits, and we are vision, dental, hearing, and vertically I mean we've got to start covering more people. Let's get it to 60. Let's get it to 55, and that's what many of us are pushing for.
Representative Ro Khanna is with us for the hour, taking your calls in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting. He's the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents California's 17th District in the U.S. House. His website is Khanna, K-H-A-N-N-A, Khanna.house.gov, and you can tweet him at RepRo, that's R-O, RepRo Khanna on Twitter. We'll be right back with your calls for him.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Congressman Khanna taking your calls in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting. Back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Joe in Cupertino, your weekly call to the show. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you for following up on that Toyota story. I was very interested in that. I'm glad that you ran that to ground for me.
Yeah.
Congressman, you had a wonderful town hall, and I appreciated your enthusiasm at the end yesterday when you had said that you had served 4 years under Trump and you hated the fact that you were glad now that you were here to serve under President Biden. And I really feel positive about that. It's like with football, we've got the ball, but now what are we going to do with it? My question, though, today is that during the town hall, there was a lot of tweets or people were commenting on H.R. 2590. So I was doing some reading on that. And I understand that you haven't co-sponsored that, but I understand you as a person. And reading that, I see the border south of us is very much similar to the border in Israel. The people are indigenous, and they are being treated as they're immigrants, but they are actually, this is their land. And so I just wondered how you felt about 2590. I'm very supportive of taking care of the children that are subject to the Israeli military being taken out of their parents' house in the middle of the night, interrogated, scarred for life, and their homes being taken away from Palestinians because they don't get building permits from the Israelis. Could you please advise?
Joe, I appreciate the question, and here is what I have said. I'm opposed to the demolition of Palestinian villages. I'm opposed to the settlement expansions. I'm opposed to any of our aid being used in a way that would violate human rights, which certainly would include having incarceration or interrogation of children without lawyers, the example you cite. But I believe that all of that can be addressed through the Leahy Law and through the Arms Export Control Act, and ought to be addressed in the context of all of our aid. And what we ought to require right now, the problem is a lot of the aid that we give to countries, you don't have to report to the State Department how that aid is being used. And I think what we ought to focus on is strengthening the Leahy Law to require that reporting, strengthening the State Department to require that, and it would get to a lot of those issues while being applied generally to every country that's a recipient of our aid.
Karen, Friday Harbor, Washington. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Hello, Tom and Representative Khanna. This is really an infrastructure question regarding energy independence. I was wondering if it's really a true technology that you can get energy out of a plant such as hemp. I'm calling regarding whether anybody's had an experience using hemp batteries, or, because our electric grid is going to be pretty challenged with all these electric cars plugging in. It's an energy independent.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. I am not familiar in the details of that science, but I'm happy to look into it. I do think it's a very encouraging sign that you have Senator Schumer now proposing federal decriminalization of marijuana. That shows how far the party has moved, even in my 5 years in Congress. And I think it's going to be just a matter of time before it is legalized and before you have a Safe Banking Act that's already passed the House so that people can actually bank the money in the industry. Energy may be another area, and I'm happy to look into that.
And they've been making diesel fuel out of hemp oil for a century now.
Wonderful.
Start. I mean, I think that some of Henry Ford's early cars, I know some of them ran on alcohol, but I think some of them ran on I may be wrong. Anyway, don't quote me.
I didn't know that. You learn something new on the Hartmann Show every time.
Yeah, well, I believe. I'm not certain. So anyway, we'll be right back with Congressman Khanna in just 1 minute after I read a short commercial on the other side. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So a while ago at Davos, Michael Dell, the computer billionaire who started out selling computers out of his dorm room in college. I was running CompuServe forums back in the day. This is in the late 70s or the early 80s, and he was selling them on CompuServe in my forums. And, now he's worth billions. And somebody asked him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is proposing a 70% tax bracket for people who make the kind of money you make. What do you think of that? And his response was, a 70% tax rate? Name a country where that ever worked. Ever. And it turns out there is such a country, and apparently Michael Dell didn't know this. I think a lot of Americans don't know this, that there was a country that had its greatest period of prosperity in its entire history with a top tax rate that was above 70%. In fact, it hit 90% for more than half the time. And that was the United States of America. It's a new video over at ThomHartmann.com. Representative Ro Khanna taking your calls for the hour. Paul in Woodinville, Washington, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yes, I'd like to restate the question. Why should any disabled person be paid less? When you can answer that question, then you're started on something, because when you pay a person with one type of disability less, you devalue all people with disabilities they're all looked at as being damaged goods. In fact, you devalue workers because it perpetuates the notion that the employer is giving you a job, that these jobs are being invented and given to you just out of the goodness of their heart. If these are real positions, real jobs, and somebody needs a job to say, hi, hello, welcome to Walmart, that's a real job, and they should be paid the real money. You're not doing them a favor by paying them less, because when people start getting paid a real wage, maybe the disability doesn't matter anymore. And I know this because it doesn't matter what your qualifications are, whether you got a PhD or not. They can always find somebody with a PhD who isn't blind. And this audience knows, take it from me, I'm one of the dumbest people you're ever going to talk to, but I'm blind. And I've been through the whole damn thing. Start paying disabled people what you pay everybody, and then the disability doesn't matter. Thank you.
Well, Paul, thank you. Thank you for your passion. Obviously, the bill I supported that passed the House does exactly that. It calls for a $15 minimum wage, and it supports disability, people with disabilities getting the same living wage. And I've been a big advocate of a $15 wage. I do know that there are a number of disability groups that have been talking to Bobby Scott and others in Congress, saying that they feel that there are those in the disability community who don't like that provision and want to have options for work that pay less. I said I'm going to listen to them with an open mind because it's coming from that community. But the bill as written that I voted for supports a $15 wage for everyone.
David in Chason, Minnesota. Am I saying that right?
Chanhassen. Chanhassen.
Okay, got it.
Chanhassen, Minnesota. All right. This is, yes. Anyways, I was glad to talk to you, Mr. Thom Hartmann. I was going to ask for Khanna about there's a senator. She's open. They had an open seat in Ohio, and she's trying to get to become one of your senators. And I think her name is Joanne Reese or whatever. She worked with Bernie Sanders. Unfortunately, there's another guy who's a corporate Democrat, and he is outraising her money, and he's trying to cut her off and trying to make, kind of call everything bad about her. But I think she would be a great.
This is you're talking about Nina Turner, David, and
you got it.
Got it. Let's let Congressman. Let's let Congressman Khanna.
She's a close friend. I mean, we co-chaired Sanders' campaign for almost 2 years. She's incredible. She's bold in her vision on Medicare for All, on the Green New Deal, on racial justice. She's incredibly effective. She did a phenomenal job with the Sanders campaign. She's represented that area. She's up about 20 points in the polls, and you've had the entire establishment panicked because they know what an effective person she will be for that constituency. And she's reached out, by the way, broadly. I mean, she has the mayor's support of Cleveland, who wasn't a Sanders supporter. She has the local newspaper, which is as establishment as it gets, support her because they think she'd do the best job. But the national establishment is concerned because she speaks her mind and would put the district and her conscience ahead of the party. And so they're mobilizing against her. I don't think it'll be effective as long as people in that area go out and turn out to vote.
And I think that election is going on right now. I could be wrong. But
it is. August 3rd is the date, but people can vote by mail right now.
Yeah. Jeff in Portland, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Senator Khanna, thanks again for the town hall. Representative Khanna, I believe I read the Senate bill does appropriate enough money to lower the Medicare age to 60, so I hope the Progressive Caucus will fight for that specifically in reconciliation. And parallel to that, a couple weeks ago, your fellow Thom Hartmann town haller, Rep. Pocan, said at some point this year there's going to be a bill that increases Social Security benefits by lifting the cap on taxable income, which is now stands at $140,000. But my question for you, Congressman, why not try and include this in reconciliation, since it would pay for itself? To honor President Biden's pledge, you could you could even leave a donut hole in it and not tax between $140,000 and $400,000, but start taxing again after $400,000. What do you think? Thanks, Representative Khanna.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I'm all on board, and we can push for that as one of the revenue raisers, and that would obviously allow for even Social Security benefits to increase, or some of it could be used to pay for infrastructure. And one of the Social Security bills in the House also exempts the first $50,000 for individual filers or $100,000 for couples from the Social Security tax, which was, as many people in this program have pointed out, the law before 1983 didn't tax anything, and this tries to exempt the working class from it. So there is the bill Mark Pocan referred to, and your suggestion of getting some of the tax revenue in reconciliation is a good one. I'm not sure it'll fly because obviously we don't have broad-based support in the Senate yet for it, but it's worth advocating.
Congressman, we have 10 seconds. So thoughts about the coming weeks?
Well, I think it's all about what your callers have focused on, the reconciliation bill, making sure we move with it. I think we shouldn't spend too much time on this bipartisan thing. Let's get as bold a plan passed.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for dropping by today.
Tom, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. You do a great job, and we are so glad that you can come on the program. Congressman Ro Khanna, you can check out his website at khanna.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. Ro Khanna. We'll be back with Anything Goes Friday. Your calls, our conversation, right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
Our book today is Jailbreak Out of History by Butch Lee. This is from the first chapter, Jailbreak Out of History, Harriet. Focus on Amazons, about why we deal with real women as myths, girls who never really existed. Yet and again, all are around us, and that we can't bring ourselves to see. Because seeing through white men's eyes is about non-vision of ourselves. So let's deal with a real Amazon. Think about Harriet Tubman. Take 6 months. In fact, take a year and think. Break it on down. What does it mean to be the most famous new African woman in U.S. history? What does it mean to be stuck in that lie? What's the meaning of being famous while being hidden and disfigured and dissed? Let's jailbreak Harriet Tubman out of white history and place her in Amazon and new African her story, her people's story. Harriet Tubman's life is a live weapon placed in our minds, showing us what it means to be an Amazon, which is why the capitalist patriarchy has forbidden us to touch on it for so long. In this, maybe for the first time, we can see Amazons as a future force in a clash of peoples and nations, not as myths, but as players in the whole difficult course of world politics. We can also appreciate the bittersweet tang of reality as the peeling away of layers of propaganda and disfigurement which have hidden Harriet from us exposes how much we assume and how little we have known. New African women have already pointed out the significant pattern of Harriet's exclusion. Cultural critic Bell Hooks said recently, I mean, if we could recover Ida B. Wells and Harriet Tubman to the extent that we've recovered, say, Zora Neale Hurston, I think that's an important contrast because people want to bury that revolutionary black female history. Historian Deborah Gray White connects Harriet's treatment to a larger pattern in the mainstream history of slavery, in which black women, quote, were reduced to insignificance and largely ignored, end quote. In examining the influential historian Stanley Elkins, she points out, quote, that Elkins seems to omit women altogether was accentuated by his description of slaves whom he identified as part of an American underground, those who never succumbed to Samboism. Among those mentioned were Gabriel, who led the revolt of 1820, Denmark Vesey, leading spirit of the 1822 plot at Charleston, and Nat Turner, an omission conspicuous by its absence, was Harriet Tubman. If Elkins had really been thinking of slaves of both sexes, he would hardly have forgotten this woman, who became widely known as the Moses of her people, end of quote. Patriarchal capitalisms, which only want Amazons to be exotic myths about forgotten ages, have hidden Harriet Tubman in her own fame. They both trivialize and exceptionalize her. These are tools of oppressor culture. The stripped down and censored version of her life is told in elementary schools all over the U.S. empire. So much so that everyone thinks they know her story already, although they don't. Harriet Tubman was born in slavery in Maryland around 1820. She escaped to the North when she was 29, but kept returning secretly to the South again and again to help other slaves escape. For this, she became known as Moses. True statements. But by limiting her, it becomes clever propaganda against her and against her people. Where patriarchy has been unable to deny that women do significant things, it denies the full meaning of what we do by trivializing them. Mary Daly, feminist philosopher, traces the enormity of what patriarchy has done to us. In ancient Greece, the goddess Hecate, also known as Artemis and Diana, was sometimes known as Trivia and represented by a three-faced statue. That was also the name used for the intersection of three paths, which in many old cultures were the sites of mystical power. She writes in Gynecology, quote, in light of the cosmic significance of the term trivia as the crossing of the three roads and of the goddess who bears this name, contemporary meaning of the term in English should be examined. The English term, which according to Merriam-Webster is derived from the Latin trivium or crossroads, is defined as common, ordinary, commonplace, of little worth or importance, insignificant, flimsy, minor, or slight. Of course, according to patriarchal values, that which is commonplace is of little worth. For in a competitive hierarchical society, scarcity is intrinsic to worth. Thus, gold is more important than fresh air, and consequently, we are forced to live in a world in which gold is easier to find than pure air. End quote. So to trivialize Harriet Tubman, the capitalist patriarchy pictures her as an idealized woman by their definition, who makes a life of helping others. Thus, her deeds are squeezed into women's assigned maternal role as nurturer, helper, and rescuer of men, who then go on to do important things. But Harriet wasn't repping Mother Teresa. She wasn't even any kind of civilian at all. She was a combatant, a guerrilla, a warrior carrying pistol and rifle, fighting in her people's long war for freedom, a war that rocked the foundations of American society, and that has never gone away. Think about what it means to be called Moses, which was the code name other new Africans gave her, and which became Harriet's famous warrior name in the anti-slavery underground. When we check out the Bible, we can see that Moses was a ruthless visionary, someone who forced the boldest changes and risks upon his people so that they could survive, who led them out of captivity. To put it simply, Moses was a leader in a time of war. So too was Harriet Tubman. The book Jailbreak Out of History by Butch Lee.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back to Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Just wanted to give you a heads up. This is from the Daily Poster, which is this one by Julia Rock, one of the reporters over there. This is David Sirota's newsletter, dailyposter.com. The budget, or not, it wasn't called budget. What is the actual name of this thing? The American Rescue Plan. That was the piece of legislation that got passed a couple of months ago by budget reconciliation. Not a single Republican voted for it. And it's about $1 trillion. In fact, it's I think they might have been a little more than that. And 200 million of it, or excuse me, 200 billion of it was direct aid to the states. So the Democrats passed this legislation to stimulate the economy, keep people above water, give people another $300 a week on their unemployment, all this kind of stuff. And there was $200 billion going to the states because state governments' revenues were down, because tax collections were down, because businesses were shut down. And a lot of people were unemployed. And unemployed people don't pay income taxes. And when, restaurants and stores and things are shut down during a pandemic, they're not making a profit. And so they're not paying income taxes to the states. And so the states were hurting. But they built into this $200 billion grant to the states, they built in a provision that says, you may not use this money for giving tax cuts to rich people. I mean, it literally says that. You may not do this. But they're doing it anyway. I mean, it's just breathtaking, right? The Arizona legislature just passed a $1.9 billion income tax cut designed to benefit the wealthy, with 93% of the benefit going to the top 20% of earners and over half going to the top 1%. This, again, from Julia Rock's piece in today's dailyposter.com. Ohio passed Republicans in Ohio. I should preface this always with the Republicans, because that's who's... Ohio passed $1.7 billion in tax cuts, over half of which will flow to the top 5% of earners, and over a third of which will flow to the top 1% in Ohio. And Wisconsin, and we'll see if Governor Evers, vetoes this, Wisconsin passed more than $2 billion, because the Republicans control their legislature there because of gerrymandering. Wisconsin passed more than $2 billion in tax cuts, about 3/4 of which will go to individuals who make $100,000 or more. And now the big question is, will the Treasury Department step in and enforce the law? And, sadly, the Treasury Department has indicated that they are not going to aggressively, enforce this in the past. And frankly, I think this is a test. This is the law. So, to the Biden administration and to Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, are you going to enforce the law? Are you going to, stop the money to these states? And I believe that's the remedy. If they use that money to hand off to the billionaire Republican donors in those states, because that's what's going on. You've got, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, in what was the third state? In all three of these states, let me get back to my article here. Arizona, was it? Yeah, Ohio. Yeah, Arizona. Arizona, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Now, you've got Republican legislators who are taking millions of dollars in aggregate from wealthy people in their states to keep them in power and to keep them getting them reelected and pay for their campaigns and subsidize their lifestyles, essentially. And the way that they're paying back these donors is with giant tax cuts. So is the Treasury Department, will the Treasury Department have the courage to enforce this? Stay tuned. I'll bring you up to date on whether they do or not, but this is rather bizarre, I would say, if nothing else. So anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday. Let me pick up your phone calls here. Kevin in Santa Rosa, California. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hi. I'm calling because PG&E wants to reduce the amount that they pay people who have rooftop solar for an electricity they sell back to the grid. And they want to charge $70 a month to be hooked up to the grid.
Oh, geez.
If you have rooftop solar.
This is what happens when you've got a power company that is a giant corporation as opposed to a public utility.
Right. Now, there's a Public Utilities Commission, and their mission is to protect the populace from the utilities. But for decades, they've been protecting the utilities from the populace.
Right.
Loretta Lynch, who's former head of the PUC, a couple of days ago on a different show, suggested that since Gavin Newsom just appointed a bunch of new members to the PUC, that people call their state senator and tell them not to vote on confirming the PUC commissioners, which is a 5-year term, until after they vote on the rooftop solar issue. And then if they vote to support PG&E, don't confirm them.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a plan, Kevin. Is there a website where California listeners can find more information?
No, not that I know of.
Okay. But call your state senator.
State senator.
Yeah, call your state senator. And if you don't know who represents you in the Senate, in the California Senate, if you're a California citizen, you can easily, just plug it into a search engine and find out and get that information and go with it. Okay, got it. Thank you, Kevin. Larry in Asheville, North Carolina. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'm extremely disappointed and discouraged by President Biden's comments yesterday. I think it was when he was with Merkel on Cuba. I've liked so far what he's been doing on helping people out with COVID relief and getting out of Afghanistan, and then all of a sudden he comes and calls Cuba a failed state and saying that communism doesn't work while we're 80% of everything we buy in Walmart's from communist China and Vietnam, and then saying even socialism is not the answer. And he's standing next to Angela Merkel, whose country on the spectrum of socialism is way above ours, and forgetting that an island nation may need some form of socialism more than cowboy capitalist America.
Yeah.
Wondering if you might know if there's any way Congress can go ahead and end the embargo or get it back to the Obama era level without
Congress
Biden.
could pass a law forcing that, yes. But, whether they will or not, the problem you have is that the Republicans are going to be absolutely unified in opposing any kind of anything, rapprochement of any sort with Cuba. And you've got a few Democrats, particularly the Florida Democrats, who are basically intimidated by the Cuban Americans, largely in Florida, who are still hoping that their parents' and grandparents' estates and mansions and whatnot, apartment buildings and whatnot in Cuba can be recovered, can be clawed back from the Cuban government. I mean, they're still trying to do that. They're still trying to say, we need to take down the Cuban government. We need to give back that stuff to the wealthy people who had it. And A, that's not going to happen. And B, I agree with you, Larry. I think in this regard, Biden is still living in the Cold War, and I wish he would, wake up and pay attention to what's, really going on here. Because
is he running for mayor of Miami? When is the Democrats just going to write off that voting block and just walk away?
I know it's. I completely get it, Larry, and it's as frustrating to me as it apparently is to you. And I'm very hopeful that the Biden administration gets with the plan. He was in the room when President Obama worked out, a rapprochement, I don't know a better word, moderating the embargo. And as a consequence of that, Louise and I were able to go to Cuba and spend a couple of weeks there. And it was
with the Obama guidelines.
Yeah, and we need to go back to that. Larry, thank you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Stick around. We're just getting started here. It's Anything Goes Friday in the third hour of our program today. Back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Mark Taylor Canfield in Seattle. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Oh, the Seattle Music Clubs are back. People are showing up in hordes supporting the local bands, so we're really happy to see that happening. I attended the grand reopening of one of our legendary music clubs on Saturday called Numos up on Capitol Hill in the middle of the city. Mm-hmm. And the band Eldridge Gravy and the Quartz Supreme were there. They put me on the guest list, so that was great. And they're a very popular local funk band with like 10 members and a full horn section with backup singers. So that was great show. And then Kremworth, my friend Dane Garfield Wilson is spinning there, and people were lined up for blocks just hoping to get in, even though the club was at capacity. And I saw that all over town this weekend, Tom, where people were lined up around the corner, even knowing that, a lot of them knowing that they probably weren't going to get in, but just wanting to be a part of the buzz as these new venues open. And some of them have restrictions, of course. So one of the places that people were going to is a famous place up on Capitol Hill, and that club was telling people that they needed to, the Barbosa was telling people that they needed to show either a vaccine card or proof of a negative test, or they were required to wear masks. So we still have some restrictions going on, although I have to tell you at Numos, where people lined up around the block, to get in, there were no restrictions. So some of the clubs that are smaller, that maybe only 100 people or a few hundred people, they are actually doing away with a lot of the restrictions. So
that's dangerous.
The music is back. People are spending their money liberally in the local bars and restaurants. And I think it's a good time especially for local bands, because the national acts haven't got their tours together yet. So it's all local bands that are being featured in all of the clubs in Seattle right now. So it's like a big music festival every weekend. And watch for the Black Tones and Shayna Shepherd and Barracks to get some really big national attention, because they definitely are doing this authentic kind of rock sound that's coming back. And my band is going to be out there too, MTC and the Rebel Saints. So things are coming back, Tom, with some restrictions, but it's looking good for the Seattle music scene after over a year. People really, really appreciate the scene here after not having this opportunity for a long, long time.
Yeah, totally get it. Mark, thanks for the report. It's great to hear from you. Booba in Seattle. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, you got it right. So what I'm trying to say, why is it that any time I'm talking about the election coming to in Ohio, in Atona, I remember a couple of months ago he was almost like 15 points, but now look at it, it's almost like they all equal. And Clyburn just jumped there to support Santel Brown.
Clyburn and Clinton.
Yes. So why is it that the establishment always do this to the progressive? Why is the unity they're talking about? I let you finish. Answer my question.
I'm guessing that big money plays a big role in that, Booba. I think that you've got some Democrats who, and in this case, it's Hillary Clinton and Jim Clyburn, who have people with substantial. Go ahead.
Yeah, they call themselves progressive. That's what they say.
Yeah. And in many regards they are, but there are some areas, and I'm guessing probably healthcare. Nina Turner is outspokenly in favor of Medicare for all, and there's some animus against Bernie too, because he dared to challenge Hillary, and I think that she to this day is thinking that his challenge of her in the primary was one of the reasons why she didn't win the election. I'm skeptical of that claim, but it's been made before. It was made about Jimmy Carter in 1984. So anyhow, Booba, I got to run, but thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So there's a new study that this is not peer-reviewed, but it is in preprint. It is being peer-reviewed as we speak, where the scientists were looking at the ability of the COVID virus to jump from the human species. It started with bats, and then it apparently went to pangolins and then to humans, to jump from humans to other species, which would be a big problem. If we can infect other mammals, our cats and dogs, if we can infect rats or mice, who have traditionally been disease vectors for all kinds of things, from the bubonic plague to hantavirus, if we can infect them with this virus, we've got a whole brand new problem. And sure enough, they have found that these two variants, B351 and P1, both can infect mice in the laboratory. And they say this abrogation of the species barrier represents a serious problem. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. So it's Anything Goes Friday, and Ron in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Before I get to my point, real quick, the songbirds have disappeared from the area. Indiana.
Songbirds are disappearing? Oh, my.
They're gone. They're gone. But anyway, my point is, yesterday President Biden said that the demonstrations in Cuba proves that communism doesn't work. And it's not the perfect, but if it wasn't for the generals deciding and admirals deciding that they were not going to follow a dictator into a coup d'etat, already we are in the throes of a dictatorship with the Republicans, thwarting all of our rights as voting and this and that. But we are depending on the generals to keep. And I predicted this. I told my son this. I said, it's going to come to a civil war, and it's going to, whether the military, who they're backing.
Well, I started saying this in the second week of November. I was saying, Donald Trump is going to try to start a war with Iran in order to provide a cover for his efforts to hang on to the White House. And I was warning people about that throughout November and throughout December and into early January. And people would say, oh, you're being paranoid, or, hey, it'll never happen. Well, we learned today that was something that Donald Trump actually was trying to do. He was trying to start a war with Iran, and the guy who stopped him was General Mark Milley.
And one final point, if I may, Tom.
Yeah.
This goes to, you said, and many people say, public service, whether the draft or, CCC camps again, this is a thing that we have to look the long-term goal, 40, 50 years down the line, teaching our sons and daughters to take leadership roles like General Milley, like Secretary Lloyd. So if we survive that long, okay, if this fragile thing still survives that long, but, I'm looking long-term, I have hope, I have faith, just like I know you do, but thanks for being out there.
The climate situation is beyond a crisis, and the political situation is in a crisis. And so, Ron, I'm with you. I totally get it. Michael in Memphis, Tennessee. Michael, what's on your mind today?
Tom, I'm extremely angry, as my wife says, it's all the time now. I don't understand how the President of the United States and the Vice President, you have the White House, you have the House, you have the Senate. I don't want to hear that slim majority. I don't want to hear that, because when the Republicans have the reins, they put pressure where it needs to be to get things done. Biden gave this speech that was a bunch of fluff the other day. My wife says, really good. I'm like, no, it's fluff, because he didn't say what needed to be said. They have to do, we keep saying they have to do something about the filibuster. Well, Manchin, in cinema. Tom, there is no way that there is not pressure that can be brought to bear on those two individuals.
I agree. I've been saying this. I've been tweeting about it. I wrote an op-ed about it. I've been ranting about it. There are both carrots and sticks. They could be saying, oh, you want a bridge named after you, Joe Manchin? Or, oh, you're on four committees. How'd you like to go down to two? I mean, there are things that Chuck Schumer can do to Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. There are things that Joe Biden can do to Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. And I'm hopeful, Michael, that behind the scenes, that is what's going on. But I'm not seeing any evidence of it, which alarms me.
Yeah, I don't see it, and I look at it, Tom. I'm a black man who lives in Memphis, Tennessee, in the South, which is as backwards and inbred as you can get.
Yep.
The laws that they're passing in these states, and Tennessee is on deck to do the exact same thing that they're doing, they will never affect Joe Biden or anybody in his family that looks like him. They'll never have to worry about it. Kamala Harris has money. It'll never affect her. Chuck Schumer, her Dianne Feinstein, it'll never affect any of these Democrats. That's why they don't care. See, they
I
can
don't
get
think
on
they don't
TV
care.
and say, well, we're going to get this done.
No, hang on, Michael. There is, you know, if Joe Manchin is pushing back and saying, okay, if you don't like what I'm saying, then I'm just going to become a Republican, which is what the governor of West Virginia did, Jim Justice. He was elected as a Democrat, and when Trump got elected, he flipped and became a Republican, and he's still the governor. And if Manchin is saying to Schumer and President Biden, you know, you push me too hard, I'm going to become a Republican, and you're going to lose control of the Senate instantly. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, but they don't have it now, Tom. I mean, so you do nothing. That's the thing.
Well, they do
so
have
do
it now
nothing.
because they can still pass something. They can still pass things through reconciliation as long as they've got Manchin on their side. If they lose Manchin, they can't pass things through reconciliation. I'm not justifying what they're doing. I'm you know, as I said, I'm agreeing with you, Michael.
I understand what you're saying.
But there's a lot of moving pieces
can't
here.
Vote. Yeah, but the person that can't vote, Tom, doesn't care about reconciliation.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter to them. You're not a citizen. I mean, you don't have any rights. You can't participate in the most basic thing in this country. So to say that, oh well, you can't vote, but you know what? They got money for the state. I don't care about a bridge if I can't vote.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm completely with you. And you know, putting a carve out into the filibuster is the least that should be done for constitutional issues like voting rights. I am completely with you. Michael, thank you for the call. It's coming out. It's 27 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls on Anything Goes Friday on the other side of this break at the bottom of the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. We'll be back with Anything Goes Friday.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten thinks Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now, That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met, who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Ask a boomer what it was like going to college back in the 60s and 70s and whether they had to go into debt to do it. And odds are they'll tell you that they not only didn't have to go into debt, in fact, college was free in California until Ronald Reagan became governor. Not only did they not have to go into debt, but you could pretty much work your way through college just with a part-time job. That is very much no longer the case. Only 8% of millennials and Gen Xers have never had a student loan. This is a crushing burden on these two generations, and it's time to clean it up. And when Americans were asked, what do you think? Should we just wipe the slate clean? Should we get rid of all this student debt? 60% of Americans said yes. And then, of course, the corollary to that would be, and then let's make college free, at least state colleges and community colleges. There's a whole video about this over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program. You can check it out there. Everything Goes Friday. Welcome back, Patrick in Santa Monica. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind?
Hey there. Before I get into the topic that I wanted to discuss, the RNC was hacked by a group called the Cozy Bear, and tied to Russian intelligence, demanding $70 million in Bitcoin. But what I wanted to talk about was why can't the Biden use the Justice Department to prosecute people preventing, people from going to the polls? I remember in the last election, the previous one to this one, there were people in southern states with guns I worked the polls. I've been, over 25 years, I've been working the elections. I'm an inspector. And the thing is that we have no guns policy in California, and it's a federal law. So I was thinking maybe the Justice Department can send over deputies or, the Marshal Service or actually extra agents that they hire, go down to these problem locations and deputize maybe, they need more manpower to arrest people that are actually physically interfering with the election, and send a strong message, and to prosecute legislators, boards, or whoever for preventing people to vote. There's a law in the books already.
Yeah, I am completely with you, Patrick. What's happening right now is that the Republican Party is going into, they're diving down into the depths of Jim Crow, looking for ways that they can keep people from voting. They're throwing people off voting rolls. You had, Brian Kemp do this with over 300,000 people in Georgia, so he could beat Stacey Abrams by 50,000 votes. You had Jeb Bush do this in Florida in 2000, 94,000 people he purged off the voting rolls so that he could, so his brother George could get within 500 votes of Al Gore. And those are just, two out of probably hundreds of examples over the years since then. I mean, it's been 21 years since the 2000 election. They've been doing this since the 80s. They say that they're just cleaning the list because people have moved and died. But, an awful lot of the people they are purging have not moved or died. Greg Palast has been doing God's work on this, yeoman's work, and you can see it all at gregpalast.com. And I'm with you. I think that, they're doing everything. The Republicans are doing everything except bringing back the jelly bean test or the recite the first, article of the Constitution word for word. And if you get one word wrong, you can't vote test. It's obscene. And now they're trying to revive William Rehnquist's old Operation Eagle Eye, where they invite basically goons in. Only instead of reaching out to lawyers like Rehnquist did to challenge people at the polls, they're reaching out to the militias, these white supremacist militias, saying, come to the polling place and challenge people of color, scare them off, or threaten them, or force the poll workers to give them provisional ballots that don't get counted instead of regular ballots. So I'm completely with you, and that's what
militia groups actually had a cache of military-grade weapons to funnel to the assault on the Capitol at the Capitol riots on January 6th. They had a cache of weapons.
Oh yeah, they did. In several of the hotels, they had them stashed. And actually, it's turned out now we know of at least a half a dozen people who were carrying weapons with live ammunition. In every case, I believe they were semi-automatic pistols in the Capitol. And so,
these are military grade. These were assault weapons, and I believe that, don't quote me on this, but I believe that some of it was also, grenades or something like that. I forget what the exact description was.
Well, there were two bombs that were placed at the DNC and RNC that were presumably supposed to go off at the same time that the attack on the Capitol was going on. That was supposed to draw the police away from the Capitol, down to down to the area. It's just a couple. Our studio used to be a block from there, and it's just a couple blocks from.
We should also go ahead and arrest members of Congress and the Senate that actually aided in it, like Stacey Abrams giving a tour, pointing out how to subvert the security system.
Yeah, it wasn't Stacey Abrams giving the tour. It was Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, Patrick, and I share your outrage, and I'm hopeful that the Democrats and the Biden administration is on this. I know that the FBI has been looking at this, but we'll see where it goes. Michelle in Denver. Hey, Michelle, you're on the air. What's up?
Where we're at is partially our fault as well. So the gentleman that just said black people are outraged, we need black people to vote too. So if you're outraged, what you need to start doing is calling, donating, volunteering, and running for elected office if you are so outraged.
And make sure everybody you know is registered to vote.
Exactly. The South is the stranglehold, and my husband is from Mississippi, so I know how it is. And we talk to his relatives on a daily basis. There are people that refuse to vote. You can also leave the South, come to Colorado, show them that you matter. Show America you matter, and where you spend your money matters, where you live matters, and how you're treated matters. And that's the biggest problem with the South. If Stacey Abrams was able to register 300,000 people, those people were not voting. Yeah. They were sitting on the sidelines, and they were black and white. So we got to wait.
Yeah, I'm with you, Michelle. And we all...
They're trying to turn the clock. Yes. And we all own a part of it. We could have gave the Democrats 2 more.
Yeah. Michelle, for some reason your phone is fading out. That's why I started talking a minute ago, and I missed what you were saying. But you said it so well. Thank you so much for that call. And sorry about the phone there. Cheryl in Antioch, Illinois. Hey, Cheryl, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I'm wondering, how feasible or beneficial do you think it would be for Congress to address protection of voter rights through reconciliation? One example being by providing for free transportation to polls for people who have difficulty reaching polling places.
Oh, that's interesting. As you were halfway through your sentence, what I was thinking was reconciliation can only be used for things that have to do with raising and spending money. But then you gave an example of raising and spending money, which is transportation. That's a good question. I don't know the answer, it would be interesting to go back and see if the Help America Vote Act was passed through reconciliation in 2005. I doubt it, but I don't know. Yeah. I'm sorry I don't know the answer to the question, but I think it's a really good one, and thank you for putting it on my radar screen. I'll start paying attention to that and see what I can find out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Ron in Seattle. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Tom, there was a really thoughtful editorial in today's Washington Post, an op-ed piece that gives the chances in many historians' minds of another coup taking place.
Oh, this was the one that was quoting Timothy Snyder, right?
Yes, the Yale historian.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, what do you think? Do you and your listeners think this is still possible, and how to prevent it?
Oh, I think it's gone from possible to probable. What Tim, for people who haven't read the op-ed, basically what Professor Snyder was saying was that, who's the author of, On Tyranny is the title, as I recall? I don't have the book right here, but I think that's it, among others. But what he was saying is that these Republican voter suppression laws aren't just voter suppression laws. They also give Republicans in these states the right to decide which votes they're going to count and which votes they're going to ignore or discard. And, a power that has already been exploited and abused in many Republican states, but this is like putting it on steroids. And his point was they are preparing to steal the 2024 election. And I think he said in the op-ed, they could lose the election by 15 million votes and still put their guy in by appointing him, by going through the states and doing it this way. And using basically the same mechanism that the Republicans used in the Hayes-Tilden election, or the Tilden-Hayes election back in 1876. Or Republicans and Democrats. I mean, they got together and basically stabbed African Americans in the back. They just destroyed the whole the whole process of rebuilding and or Reconstruction was the name, but basically rebuilding the country after the Civil War and keeping a lid on the white racists in the South who were trying to suppress black politicians and the black vote. It's the piece I wrote yesterday. So, yeah, I'm with you, Ron, and I am very concerned about this. It's one of the reasons that I talk about it a lot, and I think that we need to be paying attention to it. Nikki in Joplin, Missouri. Hey, Nikki, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Yes, and don't come to Missouri, everybody. We've got the really bad.
You've got the pandemic.
That's frustrating. Yeah. Yes. My question is, and Malcolm Nance said this, that one of the plans for the Republicans wanted to do was win the House and then put Trump in as Speaker of the House and impeach Biden and Harris. And right. Malcolm Nance said there are 7 things. And I guess the Republicans gave out cards or something at one of the...
I don't know if it's the Republicans or if it's the QAnon people, because that's the favorite thing among the QAnon crazies. But
it might have been what Trump was seeking there, whatever it was, you know.
Yeah.
But what do you think of that? I mean, Malcolm Nance predicted a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I would say not a chance of it happening, but it's they're constantly tossing out these bones to the QAnon followers and the Trumples, or Trumples or Trumpies or whatever.
Whatever.
The maggots, and
and I volunteered for the Democratic Party down here. So
good on you, Nikki.
Yeah, and I'm making calls. I took your advice.
That is wonderful.
I took your advice.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, and thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. It's 46 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Lewis in Avoca, New York. Hey, Lewis, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm going to make this as quick as possible. My idea is that you talked about Macron in France making vaccine passports mandatory, and you said that was a good idea. I agree, but I don't think
1.3 million people signed up the next day after he gave that speech.
Well, I don't think it's going to happen in the U.S., so I'm starting a grassroots idea to wear your vaccine card like a name tag on your chest. I made copies and put it in plastic, and I tape it to my chest, because how's anybody going to look in your wallet,
Right.
So,
right. That's an idea.
Anyway.
If you really want to make them crazy, tattoo it on your forehead. No, I'm sorry.
Well, I ain't going that far, but
that's the whole
as far
Revelations
as
thing.
Climate change, I want to remind everybody to watch Seaspiracy on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't matter how many windmills or solar panels we put in. The fishing industry destroys the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thank you, Lewis. Thank you very much. Joy in Chicago. Hey, Joy, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. This is Joy. I'm so excited to get to talk to you. I've admired you for so long. You've been like a professor to me for politics since like 9/11.
Thank you.
But because I am organizing the March for Medicare for All in Chicago, and I've gotten the support of PDA, it's Dr. Bill Honigman, and PNHP Illinois, PDA Illinois, Illinois Green Party, Rainbow Push Coalition, and several other organizations. And so I'm just doing a shout out and welcoming everyone to come.
Joy, let me pause you right there. You're talking about Chicago. Our Chicago affiliate right now, WCPT, is in a commercial break. So I'm going to put you on hold and bring you back in 2 minutes, or actually it'll be 3 minutes, and so that everybody in Chicago can hear you, okay? Because I picked you up because you're watching us on YouTube. But let me just put you on hold. I'll pick up another call here, and then I'll get back to you. George in Palm Desert, California. Hey, George, what's on your mind?
Yeah, real quick, Tom. Out here in Palm Springs, we had this big controversy, and recently they put up a 25 to 30-foot statue of that great iconic political figure, Marilyn Monroe. Anyway, it was quite controversial, but my local newspaper said that there was approximately 750 people there to support and approximately 150 people there to protest. Now, my question is, and I have tried to find this out for the past several days, how many maggots are still going to those Trump rallies? All I ever hear is several thousand. Is that 4,000? Is it 6,000? Is it 10? He used to draw 15, 20,000 people.
Yeah.
What's he drawing now? Why can't I find this anywhere?
I don't know. I think the media is not covering them the way that they used to. He's not president anymore. I mean, kind of who cares what he does?
Good point.
And I'm guessing that he's drawing smaller crowds, but he's drawing them nationwide. I mean, I'm here in Portland, Oregon, and I got a solicitation from him. I got an offer of free tickets from him to come see him in, I believe it was Ohio last week. Or wherever he was, it's, in fact, twice now I've gotten offers of free tickets to go see Trump. And so they're blowing this thing out nationwide, and And the real maggots, the real Trump followers, you know, the cult members, the Jim Jones followers, type followers, they'll get on a bus or an airplane. So as a result of that, even if it's thousands, I think if it's presented as a local event and he's actually drawing nationwide, his support is a lot less strong than he's trying to make it look. So,
great. Good to know.
Yeah. Thank you, George. Good to hear from you. We'll be back with Joy in Chicago right after this break. I'll be back in 1 minute. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at ThomHartmann.com if you want to really support our program. We have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com about conspiracy theories. Abby Richards came up with a kind of a hierarchy of conspiracies, maybe a variation on the old Maslow hierarchy. And it goes from actual conspiracies to maybe this was a conspiracy, maybe not, we have questions, to this is kind of crazy stuff, but who knows, you know, flying saucers, for example, to actual science denial, conspiracy theories that actually serve to promote the interests of a particular industry or wealthy individuals, to the totally crazy stuff, the flat earth, the reptilian overlords and all that kind of thing, conspiracy theories that can do tremendous damage. And, you know, one of those being one of the conspiracy theories that, you know, brought two Republicans into Congress this year. So anyhow, I lay the whole thing out with a new video for our supporters over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Joy in Chicago. So Joy, you are organizing activities for this coming weekend. Is it tomorrow or a week from tomorrow in Chicago?
A week from tomorrow, July 24th.
Okay, tell us about it.
Okay, I'm so excited. Okay, July 24th from 11 to 2 p.m. I am the, point of contact for March Medicare for All that we're starting over from the Blue Cross Blue Shield building across the street at Maggie Daly Park, and we're going to march over to the Federal Plaza, where we're going to have our rally and a bunch of speakers. One of the speakers is PNHP Illinois and PDA Illinois Dr. Pam Gronemeyer. Mm-hmm. We have NNU Medicare Leadership Graduate Martise Chisholm. He's speaking, and we also have Jamal Green, and we're going to have Junaid Ahmed. And performing, we have Oscar Brown Jr.'s daughter, Maggie Brown. We're still getting things straightened out. But
that's great. Is there a website, Joy, for people in Chicago who want to know more and show up?
Absolutely. It's the letter M for March, number 4, all.org. M4all.org. M4MALL. Do I have that right? But M4 all.
Oh, okay. So the M4 gets repeated twice. M4all.org, right?
Yes. Thank
you
so much.
Got it. Joy, I wish you the very best. Give us a shout the week after next and let us know how it worked out, okay?
Okay, thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you. It's great talking with you. I do appreciate it. Don in Sheridan, Iowa. Don, you are on the air. What's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Now, I just wanted to say that was so wonderful to see a billionaire's ego. They do have an ego, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
But
You're
the
talking
thing
about
is,
Richard Branson?
Yes, and their space travel.
Oh, yeah.
So
Reagan and Thatcher both did those tax cuts really, really big. So we've got, billionaires from the UK and the US shooting themselves in outer space instead of working in poverty.
But Tom, they had 5 minutes of weightlessness. But as I recall on your program, the carbon up there, it gets to stay forever. And that is the big plus.
I beg your pardon?
The carbon from being up in the atmosphere.
I missed. That was the word I missed. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You told me it stays there.
I've been really surprised that nobody has quantified the amount of carbon that got blown into the atmosphere to take Branson into outer space. or how much carbon is going to be used to take Jeff Bezos into outer space this coming week. I don't know, but I would like to know. Thank you for the call. Lowell in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Lowell, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to warn you about falling into the rotating villain strategy that the Democrats appear to be using with Manchin and Sinema, because there are more than just Manchin and Sinema against removing the filibuster.
Oh, I know that. Dianne Feinstein has come out.
Pat Leahy and Tom Carper are also, but they're not as loud, so nobody focuses on them. Yeah. So they'll still be a problem next time.
My understanding is they are also persuadable, that they're not drawing firm lines in the sand, although Feinstein appears to have.
But they did this in 2009 with Joe Lieberman with the public option. They claimed only he was the only obstacle. But in the Senate Finance Committee, there were 5 senators who voted no on the public option, which were Max Baucus, Blanche Lincoln, Kent Conrad, Bill Nelson, and Tom Carper, who is, a continuing villain.
Yeah, and these are all heavily corporate financed Democrats.
So don't fall into the rotating villain trap.
Yeah, it's an easy shorthand for what's going on, and I think you're right. There's nuance there that's important to identify. Lowell, thank you for the call and for recalibrating all of us. We'll be back on Monday. I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for being with us today, and don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. So get out there, get active, tag your it. Have a wonderful weekend. Be good to yourself and the people around you. We'll see you on Monday. Thanks again for being with us today and for sharing the word about our program with your friends and contacting the media that you're hearing this program on. Thank you.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit ThomHartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.